Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 6 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a civilian stuck in a time loop with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 101, all done, let's get going. With those words, Kazuo gave the three Gennin under him a slight nod before using the body flicker jutsu to vanish from his position and appear tens of meters away. The three, though still stumped by what they had just witnessed, followed immediately after Kazuo without any delay, their bodies flickering before they also appeared right behind Kazuo. The group of four-leaf ninja who had just left behind a chaotic capital as well as a multitude of corpses continued on their way back. This time, Kazuo had increased their pace even further as they tried getting away from the capital as quickly as they could. Staying close to the capital was just asking for trouble. Finally, after around 3 hours of non-stop running, the group arrived close to a small village where Kazuo planned on spending the night. Unfortunately, fate didn't seem to want to follow his plans. As Kazuo slowed down his speed, he started turning his head toward his Gennin. It was at this moment that he saw it. On their left side stood a man. A man that Kazuo had known even before he had entered this world. He was wearing a black headband and a face mask as well as a cloth that covered his hair and brown skin as well as a pair of green eyes with red scars surrounding them. The man looked more like a monster covered in human skin rather than a human. Kakuzu thought to himself as he immediately started circulating his chakra to make a clone. He didn't have enough time, however. In an instant, his body was engulfed by a fire, wind, and lightning jutsu. Managing to see what had attacked him from his right side, Kazuo saw three large hairy monsters with white masks on what was presumably their faces. This fucker, Kazuo thought before stopping. Why am I still alive? Kazuo thought to himself before he saw it. Something unbelievable was happening right in front of his eyes. The entire world had turned black and white in an instant before every scene started turning back literally. His ruined body returned to its previous place before it started moving in reverse for around a minute. Though he didn't know of it, his left eye had changed as this was happening. It had turned into a bright orange color, and inside of his pupils, a clock had appeared, a clock that was turning back. Is this the ability of time loop at rank 2? Partial loop? Kazuo thought as he felt himself regain control over his body. Similarly, as soon as the feeling returned to his body, his eyes changed back to normal once more. He was now around a minute before his time of death. How can I use this? How can I use them? I don't stand a chance in hell against Kakuzu, however I should be able to at least escape him. Kazuo thought to himself as he stopped on the spot, the three churning behind him stopping as well. Turning towards the three, Kazuo gave them a light smile. Go ahead, there's someone chasing us. I'll take care of them and then we can meet at the village close to here, Kazuo said, his voice clearly giving the feeling that he didn't want anyone to question his orders. Yes, sir, Azuma replied before he quickly nodded at the other two and used the body flicker to go on ahead. Kazuo meanwhile felt his lips curl even further upwards before he quickly used the body flicker jutsu to turn the other way around, taking a longer path towards the hidden leaf. With speed that far surpassed the previous one he had used with the group, Kazuo continued to run ahead. Minutes passed before he suddenly felt a feeling of danger coming from behind him. It was pure unadulterated bloodlust. Turning his head, he saw him again. Kakuzu was chasing after him. This bastard, Kazuo thought as he quickly circulated his chakra in a set pattern. Shadow clone. Paper style, paper clone. Paper style, paper illusion. Earth style, hiding like a mole technique. In almost an instant, Kazuo performed 4 different jutsu. His real self quickly hid underground whilst under the protection of his paper illusion, and his shadow clone took his place whilst a paper clone appeared next to it, though it was under a paper illusion as well, making it invisible to Kakuzu's eyes. Finally decided to stop running, brat, Kakuzu said, his voice sounding aged and gravelly beyond anything Kazuo had heard anyone or anything sound like. I don't believe I was running. I never thought I would meet someone like you from the leaf, Kakuzu said instead. Sending your comrades to their deaths so that you could escape, Kakuzu said as 4 bulges appeared on his back. Those bulges quickly expanded further and further until Kakuzu's skin could no longer stretch any further and tore apart. There were 4 masks on these bulges that in reality were 4 monsters made entirely of black silky hair. That's quite disgusting, Kazuo muttered to himself as he saw the monsters. Is it? Well, it's the last thing you will see. Kakuzu replied before the 4 monsters launched themselves towards Kazuo at the same time. Meanwhile Kazuo, the real one, was running away underground. I need to create as much time as possible so that I can escape, Kazuo thought before he felt it. It was slow at first, but it quickly got faster and faster. Poison? When? Kazuo thought as he quickly scanned over his memories. Yesterday when we stopped, that bastard gave me a rations bar. Kazuo thought as he remembered taking a ration bar from Kazuo when he had woken up. Fuck! Fuck! Kazuo thought as anger started swelling inside of him. Calm down, he should have an antidote, Kazuo thought before stopping in place. In an instant, he gathered his chakra and overloaded his brain, causing it to explode instantly. Time once again turned back. Opening his eyes, Kazuo found himself back in time once more. Chapter 102, time once more started reversing. And Kazuo opened his eyes once again after his suicide. Looking around, Kazuo found himself back to 1 minute before the death he had seen with his new future vision. It's midnight. Kazuo suddenly realized it had completely slipped his mind. After he had gained strength that his life wasn't as in danger as before, he had almost forgotten. His time loop starts from when he was first awake in the current day. Fuck, that means I'm still poisoned, Kazuo thought to himself before he quickly gave a new set of orders to his men. The seconds were ticking and he needed to do something and quickly if he didn't want a meaningless death again. Yujiro, Azuma, you two head forward to the town. There's someone tracking us. Kazuo and I will deal with it, Kazuo ordered instantly. His expression had already turned into a deep frown before he motioned to Kazuo with his head and used the body flicker around 6 times. That was enough to gain a big enough distance with the other two. As soon as he gained that distance, Kazuo stopped. Kazuo, who was much slower, arrived 3 seconds later and stopped right next to him. Who's after us, Captain? He questioned, his tone of voice clearly showing how he was already on guard. Kakuzu, we're most likely going to die, however before I can even try to survive him, I need that antidote, you fucker, Kazuo said as turned toward Kazuo. The surroundings around them immediately became completely white. It almost looked as if they had been teleported into an area of complete nothingness with only light and the two of them existing. You found out? Kazuo questioned as his expression immediately changed. If before he looked as if he was on guard and slightly nervous, now he had a completely blank emotionless look on his face. What's with Danzo and killing me? I don't think I've ever wronged the man, Kazuo muttered as he quickly used the shunshin to appear next to Kazuo. Before the man could even react, Kazuo slammed a dozen papers on his throat. The papers were imbued with in chakra that immediately attached itself to Kazuo's chakra system and headed for his brain in less than a fraction of a second. Meanwhile, the papers themselves changed shape and made a collar of sorts around Kazuo's neck. Give me the antidote, Kazuo said as he stood in front of Kazuo, who was slowly being choked as well as being drained mentally by Kazuo. There is no antidote, I have completed my mission, Kazuo said before he made a hand seal. It was a hand seal that Kazuo knew very well. This guy is using my own tricks against me, Kazuo thought as he saw Kazuo explode. The Kazuo that had been standing in front of him merely scattered into a pile of paper sheets. The real Kazuo dispelled the illusion, showing himself to be sitting on a pile of rocks with one foot over the other whilst holding his head with his fist. This is annoying. How can I deal with a poison that I don't know about whilst surviving Kakuzu at the same time? Kakuzu is actually on a lower priority, isn't that funny? Kazuo muttered to himself before releasing a long-winded sigh. I either need to create a mental manipulation technique or I need to somehow make an antidote or something that will allow me to last until I reach the hidden leaf. Kazuo thought to himself, however, no matter what he couldn't think of any way to achieve the second option. I have no idea about medical ninjutsu whilst I at least have a mastered in chakra nature for the first option. Kazuo thought before releasing another slow sigh and getting up from his seated position and looking towards the other side of the small clearing that Kazuo had created from his explosion. There the man stood once more, this time face to face with the real Kazuo and not a clone. Kakuzu of the village hidden in the waterfall village, correct? Kazuo questioned as he dusted his pants. You know of me? Kakuzu questioned, his voice showing that his interest had been piqued. You're quite the famous bounty hunter, however, I do wish to make a deal with you, Kazuo said as he started walking toward the man. Kakuzu simply watched as Kazuo got closer and closer to him without making any moves. Is he confident in himself or is he just foolish? Kakuzu thought as he saw Kazuo finally stop, merely a few meters away from him. What deal? I wish to buy your protection for double the price of the bounty in my head, Kazuo said as he looked at the man directly in his greenish-red eyes. Why should I make a deal when I can just take the pile of money that's guaranteed right in front of me? Kazuo merely gave a slight smile before summoning something in his hands. Kakuzu immediately got on guard, his posture changing to a taijutsu stance whilst the bulges on his back started wriggling, looking as if they were about to escape his body at once. When the slight smoke cleared from Kazuo's hand, it revealed a kunai. A very special kunai. A three-pronged one with a sealing jutsu attached to its handle. Because I don't want to use this and I'm sure you don't want to bring him here either, Kazuo said as he continued to look at the man in the eyes. For a few moments, silence engulfed the clearing once more. Of course, it's a fake however, can you even notice that? If you can't, are you willing to gamble on killing me before Minato shows up? Kazuo thought to himself as he almost chuckled out loud as he continued to stare Kakuzu down. Why wouldn't you want to? Unless it's a fake. Kakuzu questioned as he took a slight step forward. It would make me fail my promotion mission to a Jonin, which would lead to the Hyuga clan not adopting me as one of their own. That's too big of a loss for me. Kazuo replied as he stood his ground. Kakuzu didn't respond for a moment before releasing a gruff sound and then asking. How will you pay me? I got you, bitch. Kazuo thought as the corners of his lips tilted slightly upwards. Chapter 103, I got you, bitch. Kazuo thought as the corners of his lips tilted slightly upwards. I have the money in a seal inside my wrist guards, I'll leave it with a paper clone and head away. Of course if something does happen then I'll simply explode it all, I'll be dead if you go after me either way. Kazuo replied as he looked at Kakuzu. For a moment, Kakuzu's gaze sharpened as he looked at Kazuo, his bloodlust intensifying multiple-fold. Alright kid, 200 million Ryo. If you don't have it then you're dead. I do, though some of it is in golden bars and explosion tags, Kazuo replied as he looked at the man. That's alright, now then what do you need me to do? Kakuzu asked as he looked at Kazuo. I need you to help me survive, Kazuo replied without missing a beat. Survive? I've been dosed with a deadly poison, I need you to find me an antidote or some way to keep me alive long enough so that I can arrive at the hidden leaf, Kazuo replied as he released a small sigh. Poisoned? That guy? Kakuzu questioned as he motioned towards the explosion crater behind Kazuo. That's right. Now then, do you have any antidotes we can try on you? This will cost you extra, Kakuzu replied before throwing Kazuo 4 small vials. Kazuo nodded before immediately downing the vials one by one. Guess we just have to wait and see if it has any effect, Kazuo replied before nodding toward Kakuzu and using the body flicker jutsu. Kakuzu didn't waste a moment before using a body flicker jutsu of his own to start following after Kazuo. The two ran at speeds much higher than the regular shinobi, it was a difference as big as the night and the day. Kakuzu used his impressive physique and higher chakra volume whilst Kazuo managed with a much higher mastery over the technique. Minutes passed, however Kazuo didn't drop onto the ground. I haven't escaped the poison completely, however. Kazuo thought to himself as he felt it, the sensation of touch disappearing from his fingertips as they grew colder and colder. This should be good enough, however, I should be able to arrive at the leaf on time. Kazuo thought before a smile appeared on his face. It looked soft, however it carried a viciousness that only a serial mass murderer would have, it was a smile that seemed to combine two polar opposites at the same time. The softness of a young boy who wouldn't even be considered a man in his other world, as well as the savageness of a true shinobi, a killer with supernatural strength. I can't just let you take all of that money from me, and it's been a while now. Kazuo thought to himself as his expression turned to a blank poker face once more. His internal emotions only grew in ferocity even more, however. A hidden quest, that shitty system better give me one. Kazuo thought as he continued his run through the dense forest with the S-ranked rogue ninja following behind him. So Kakuzu, have you heard of an organization called the Akatsuki? Kazuo questioned. No, Kakuzu replied curtly before returning to silence once more. Quite the cold one, aren't you? Kazuo said before stopping in place. Kakuzu immediately stopped around 20 mentors behind him as well. Seems like I found the perfect location, Kazuo muttered before turning toward Kakuzu. Why did you stop? Because I wanted to, you fucking hairy bitch. Kazuo replied as his blank look broke, a large smirk appearing on his face instead. What are you going to do about it? Did you really think I had 200 million Ryo, Kakuzu? Kazuo questioned as he looked at Kakuzu. He's not reacting in any way. I guess I can't expect an S-rank ninja to fall to such simple taunts. Kazuo thought as he stared at Kakuzu, who released a deep chuckle. No, I did not, however. I was curious to see if you would lead me to some other leaf ninja. I've been wanting to replace some here's you see, Kakuzu replied before starting to form a set of hand seals. He however stopped midway as a confused expression appeared on his face. I see, thanks for telling me, Kakuzu, Kazuo replied with a nod of his head before making a single hand seal. An explosion? Kakuzu immediately wondered as he readied himself to the body flicker away. However, it wasn't an explosion as he had thought. You know, I've gotten a bit tired of using explosion tags these days. In fact, whilst they are useful against weak opponents, they're quite useless against someone like you. Kazuo said as he held the tiger hand seal. The chakra in his body was compressing itself. Almost as if it was a spring that was being squished. I've already arrived at a point in my journey that explosion tags have become a handicap in fights like this. Kazuo said as he released a chuckle. And just like a spring that had been squished, when the force that was placed on top of it is removed, it would bounce back up twice as strong as before. Boom! The ground under Kazuo's feet cracked as his body appeared to vanish. Kakuzu's eyes, however, were moving wildly from right to left. He's able to see me even at this speed? Kazuo wondered, feeling the need to release an inward sigh. Just how big is the difference between me and AS rank right now? With that thought, Kazuo used all of his strength to jump into the air. Kakuzu immediately raised his head to keep him in his sight. There he saw an unusual sight. Flying was a skill that many wanted, however it wasn't an easy thing to achieve. Even in the elemental nations, the amount of people who could achieve it with their own power could be counted on a single hand. That was one of the reasons why Kakuzu was slightly shocked when he saw two large angelic-looking paper wings appear on Kakuo's back. That wasn't the end of it, however. Hundreds of large paper spear-like objects were floating around Kazuo. I really want to call this the Gate of Babylon, but I'll just call it paper bombardment, Kazuo said out loud before making a forward motion with his hand. In a single moment, the hundreds of spears started flying toward Kakuzu at high speeds. That wasn't all, however. At the last moment before they collided, their entire construct lit up in an orange color. What did you actually believe me? Explosion is an art too great to leave behind, you know? Chapter 104. The explosion sounds didn't stop at once, being heard over and over as each paper spear slammed itself onto the ground and exploded one after the other. Kakuzu, however, was constantly changing locations as he dodged the explosive spears. It's not working, he's too fast for me to catch. Kazuo thought as he kept manipulating the spears, however soon enough he wouldn't even have enough paper to create a single spear. Sigh. Releasing a deep sigh, Kazuo lowered his hand, the spear barrage finally stopping after more than 30 seconds. The entire landscape around them had changed. It had gone from a lush green forest into a fiery, desolate landscape filled with large craters created by the detonation of hundreds of explosives. Are you done? Kakuzu questioned in his deep voice as he finally stood still, more than 100 meters away from Kazuo. Kazuo, however, heard him clearly, as if he was right next to him. His senses as a ninja were enhanced beyond belief when compared to a regular civilian. I am, though I do have to say that I am rather disappointed in myself, Kazuo replied as he lowered himself to the ground slowly. You are running away? Kakuzu questioned as he looked at Kazuo as if he was looking at a bag of Rio. It was an unmistakable feeling, Kazuo could clearly identify it. The feeling of being looked at as if one was nothing more than an object of value. No, you see, whilst I might be merely a bag of money to you, Kazuo said as he started walking towards Kakuzu, his paper wings scattering behind him. You are so much more than that to me. His words were said clearly and calmly, the meaning behind them however couldn't be grasped by Kakuzu, who simply raised an eyebrow in confusion. I see, though I don't care what a dead man has to say, Kakuzu replied, feigning himself to seem as if he understood, a way to seem more imposing, more intelligent in a subtle way. It didn't take a single second for Kakuzu to arrive at Kazuo's location, his speed having already reached levels beyond the speed of sound. Kazuo didn't so much as flinch when his heart was ripped out of his chest by Kakuzu's hand, his arm having speared right through the left side of Kazuo's chest. I'll make sure that you understand by the end, Kakuzu, I'll make sure, Kazuo said in reply as a large soft smile appeared on his face. His lips were already dyed red by the blood flowing out, painting an unsettling image. And so time rewinded itself back once more. Again and again. It kept repeating. Death after death. 10 times. 50 times. 100 times. 150 times. 200 times. It was only on the 201st time that something deviated. That an anomaly occurred. Due to continuous use, Time Loop has ranked up. Ability upgraded. Time Loop, rank 3. This time, Kazuo didn't wake up 1 minute before his death vision. He woke up inside his own tent. His eyes snapped open as he jumped to his feet, the motion smooth and practiced. Time Loop upgraded? Kazuo thought to himself before starting to walk towards the outside of the tent. There he saw Kazuo coming to his tent to wake him up, a ration bar in his hand. 2 days. The time loop has been enhanced to 2 days. Does that mean that if I die again right now that I get sent back even further in time, or does it create specific checkpoints in time every 2 days? Kazuo wondered before rushing his entire chakra reserves into his brain. Thump. His body fell down once more. He was dead. A moment later, in his own perception, Kazuo snapped his eyes open and found himself back inside of the same tent. There's a checkpoint system, but this isn't good. I need to experiment more. Does it mean that if I pass through 5 days without a death, I get sent back 2 days back from that point, or only 1 day? Kazuo wondered before swiftly shaking his head. I can't come up with the answer at this point, I'll just have to wait to win him back in the village. Kazuo thought as he swiftly took apart his tent and sealed it back into his wrist guard. Hey Captain, you want a ration bar? It's from the special one from the Akimichi clan. Kazuo asked as he came closer to Kazuo. Turning to face the root member, Kazuo merely gave a light nod, taking the ration bar and eating it slowly right in front of the man before getting closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, and giving a light smile. It's delicious, thank you. With those words, Kazuo quickly gave the orders and the group started their trek towards the fire capital once more. Kazuo followed his previous actions perfectly, having already become experienced enough in the time loops that he could recreate certain scenarios without a single mistake. This time, however, the change happened when they left the fire capital. Kazuo chose a completely different road from the previous turns. Instead of heading through a more roundabout path, he chose the swiftest path to head to the Hidden Leaf Village. And so without a hitch, the minutes continued to pass. There was something happening, however. Kazuo's face kept getting uglier as time passed by. Turning his head, Kazuo looked at the man and gave a light smile. Is something wrong, Kazuo? No sir, we can continue, nothing is amiss, Kazuo replied, his words sounding fluid yet at the same time they carried a hint of detachment, something Kazuo wouldn't have been able to notice before. "All right," Kazuo replied as he continued his run. The group only stopped at the last hours of the night. "We will take a 4-hour break, each of us will stand 1-hour guard," Kazuo announced before quickly unsealing his tent. "Kisuke, you will be first, Yujiro and Azuma after that in order, and I'll stand guard last," Kazuo informed the group before heading into his tent. Yujiro and Azuma quickly followed suit, heading into their own tents. Minutes passed, and Yujiro and Azuma quickly fell asleep. Meanwhile, Kisuke stood still, right in front of Kazuo's tent. "How is he still alive? I saw him eating the bar right in front of me. Does he have a poison resistance?" Kisuke wondered as he slowly moved his right arm, taking a kunai out of his ninja bag. Walking inside, Kisuke moved swiftly, his grip on the kunai tight. FSHH. With a swift slash, his kunai was colored red. A pool of deep crimson blood slowly started to form around his legs. Mission accomplished, Kisuke thought as he slowly lowered himself and pulled the soft but thin blanket. "What?" Kisuke unconsciously said as he looked at the person who he had just killed. It was a familiar face, one much more familiar than Kazuo's. It was his own. Chapter 105, What? Kisuke unconsciously said as he looked at the person who he had just killed. It was a familiar face, one much more familiar than Kazuo's. It was his own. Emotions that he had thought were long gone were once more brought to the surface. It wasn't a slow process, it was as if a hand had plunged right inside Kisuke's chest, grasped deep inside of him, and wrenched those emotions out. His hands were shaking and so was his vision. An unparalleled terror started grasping his mind as he stared at his own bloody face. A hand slowly reached from behind him. It looked as if the hand was being shaped from the shadows around the small tent, as if it was being formed mid-air. And soon enough that hand grasped the back of Kisuke's neck. There were no wasted movements, there was no talk or monologue. Crack! With a simple twist, Kisuke lost his life. Thump! His body fell down almost immediately as the hand let go of his neck. One down, now that the root is gone, all that's left to deal with is him, Kazuo said as his body was quickly reconstructed from hundreds of pitch-black papers. Looking down at the two dead bodies, one of them fake and the other real, Kazuo felt like laughing. His mind was in turmoil, however he still kept his reward in sight. Only one more kill. With those last words, Kazuo quickly bent down and sealed Kisuke's dead body whilst the illusion over the fake one dropped, the blood and supposed dead Kisuke turning into hundreds of paper sheets. Whilst from underground another figure appeared. It was the real Kazuo who had been underground. Quickly looking around and figuring that the plan was a complete success, Kazuo made another hand sign before going back underground once more whilst the paper clone took his place. The paper clone made a hand seal, creating another paper clone, with the only difference being that this time the figure wasn't a clone of Kazuo, instead it was one of Kisuke. After doing so, Kazuo went back to sleep. Hours passed and soon enough it was time. Kazuo's clone snapped his eyes open. In an instant he changed his position and immediately launched a water-style severing wave jutsu whilst at the same time creating a shadow clone. The shadow clone went up in the air whilst the paper clone stood in the ground. The real Kazuo meanwhile was already running away in a predetermined path underground. I need to recover chakra whilst at the same time creating as many paper explosion tags as possible, Kazuo thought as he arrived at the chosen location. It was a small naturally formed underground cave. Creating two shadow clones, he immediately unsettled the paper sheets he had in his wrist guards as well as 3 ink brushes before getting to work. His speed was quick, as he created explosion tag after explosion tag whilst at the same time counting the seconds in his mind. He knew he had at most 5 minutes before Kakuzu started chasing after him and another 3 minutes before he was found, and that was being generous to himself. 251, 262, 263, 264. He stood in silence as the only sound being heard was that of paper sheets being shuffled as he and the clones completed the explosion tag seal on them. Finally, after 416 seconds or just about 7 minutes, Kazuo stopped, sealed the entire paper tags that he had created and dismissed the shadow clones before plopping a soldier pill inside his mouth, it dissolving almost instantly. He's here, Kazuo thought as he sensed the ground shake. In an instant, Kazuo used the hiding like a mole technique and launched himself upwards. His movement speed was much faster than before. As soon as he escaped the clutches of the underground, Kazuo quickly formed a pair of paper wings and launched himself up into the air. Finally looking down, Kazuo saw it, or rather him. Kakuzu. The man's face was bloody whilst a glare adorned his expression. Kazuo didn't even say anything to the man who looked hell-bent on killing him and ripping his body piece by piece afterward. Instead, he only made a single hand seal. Kai. The explosion was muffled, however Kazuo still heard it, and much more importantly, he saw its effects. Kakuzu dropped down to one knee, the left side of his chest as well as his left arm had been completely blown to bits, erased from existence and turned into a shower of blood and flesh. Kazuo didn't stop, however, as he directed his attention to the two black hairy monsters that stood guard around Kakuzu. His paper wings swung wide open before they flapped once with intensity, launching Kazuo directly toward Kakuzu. With immense speed, Kazuo arrived at the two monsters in almost an instant. When he did arrive, Kazuo's paper wings immediately fragmented, launching hundreds of paper tags toward the two. These paper tags quickly surrounded the two monsters, more specifically they surrounded their heads, almost like a paper globe. Kazuo meanwhile launched a chakra-enhanced kick toward Kakuzu, who was only just starting to regain his wits. Kazuo's kick slammed into the man's abdomen and sent him flying meters away, only to be stopped when his back clashed with a tree. Kazuo didn't stop for a moment as he already sent the chakra signal, causing the hundreds of tags surrounding the two monsters' head to explode. He had 2 seconds to get away from the zone and escape the impact, however Kazuo stood still as the two paper explosions went off. Boom! Kazuo's body was launched back tens of meters and clashed against a tree similarly to how Kakuzu's body had done. However, there was a major difference between the two expressions. One looked like he was going through harrowing pain whilst the other. Kazuo had a large shit-eating grin on his face. It looked as if this was the happiest moment in his life. User has completed a hidden mission. User has done something unbelievable and has gained an achievement. Chapter 106, User has completed a hidden mission. User has done something unbelievable and has gained an achievement. Hidden mission, eliminate a known S-rank ninja. Hidden mission, defeat an Akatsuki member. Rewards are being calculated. Rewards have been calculated and will now be rewarded to the user. User has gained a major stat upgrade. User has gained an elemental Keka Genkai creation point. User bloodline has been activated to 15%. User bloodline mission has been generated. Looking at the tens of notifications that piled up in front of him, Kazuo couldn't hold back as his already large grin only widened even more. My struggle wasn't in vain, Kazuo thought to himself as he started reading each notification from the first one that had popped up. A major stat upgrade as well as the ability to create my own elemental Keka Genkai? Kazuo thought before his eyes wandered to the last two lines of notifications. A user bloodline mission? I have to complete a system mission to be able to unlock a part of my bloodline abilities? Kazuo thought before his large grin disappeared. Instead, a feeling of frustration appeared in its stead. It's already hard to get bloodline activation percentage, but now I need to do a mission on top of it? What's next? Kill the Hokage so that I can get 5% more? Kazuo thought in annoyance before closing his eyes and taking a shallow breath before releasing it slowly. Bloodline mission. With that thought, a new system panel appeared before him. Bloodline mission. User's bloodline activation has reached 15%. For further activation, user has to complete the mission given by the system. Mission, Blood Festival. Gather a vial of blood from 3 clans with blood related to time, perception, and space abilities. 0/3. Time, space, and perception. Perception is an obvious choice, it's most definitely the Byakugan. However, what clans have time or space abilities? Kazuo thought, however, he only had some clans in mind, and even then he couldn't be sure if they were indeed related to the concepts of either time or space. For a moment Kazuo felt stumped. Without completing this mission he wouldn't be able to advance his bloodline any further, he would be stuck. The Otsutsuki most definitely have both time and space abilities, however I have no chance in hell of defeating them in battle, and that's if I can even find any of them at this point in time. Kazuo thought in annoyance before releasing a soft sigh. I'll have to see if Obito's blood will do for space, and as for time? I really have no damned idea. Kazuo thought before turning his head towards the dead Kakuzu on the other side of the clearing. His head should be worth quite a bit, right? Kazuo thought as he got up from the ground and walked towards the dead man. Summoning a short sword from his wrist guards, Kazuo grabbed the man's head with his left hand, lifting the dead body up before enhancing his left hand, which was holding the short sword, with chakra, and slashing at the man's neck. Without chakra circulating through his systems, Kakuzu's skin and flesh were much softer than they had been when he was continuously enhancing them with his chakra. The slash was swift and the head was separated from the body in an instant. Making a single hand seal, Kazuo sealed Kakuzu's head and then turned around, not wasting a single second, and started to run towards the hidden leaf once more. Replaying the battle in his head, Kazuo once more felt grateful for his paper-style abilities. The only reason he had been able to survive was that he had used a paper clone to act as Kasuke, and then after destroying enough of Kakuzu's hearts which had caused the man to replace them with new hearts, he had fooled him into thinking that Kasuke was a real person and that his heart was usable. He had even used his chakra to make the paper heart act just like a real one would for a while so that Kakuzu wouldn't notice anything. This had led to his demise. At the same time, Kazuo had learned another way he could use his paper jutsu. If I don't die instantly on the occasion that my heart gets destroyed, then I could potentially replace it with a paper heart. Kazuo thought as he continued body flickering through the lush forests of the Land of Fire. His speed was slower than usual, his chakra reserves weren't in good shape, and neither was his body. That wasn't the only thing Kazuo had learned during his mission, however. My control over In chakra and my ability to create illusions using paper jutsu has risen to a level that can't even be compared to how it used to be before the mission. I'm either close or already at the level where the Sharingan can't detect my illusions anymore. Kazuo thought as his smile returned once more. Around an hour and a half later, Kazuo popped another soldier pill into his mouth. This would allow him to reach the hidden leaf faster and make his condition appear worse in front of the Hokage. I really am going to become an addicted bastard sooner or later, however. Kazuo thought, releasing a soft chuckle before increasing his body flicker speed even further. His speed reached levels that a normal Jonin could hardly track with his eyes. 2 hours later, he arrived at his destination. Out there in front of him, around a kilometer away, stood the Hidden Leaf Village. Its large green gate seemed as imposing as ever, whilst at the same time looking welcoming to others. Why make such huge gates in the first place? It's just dumb. Kazuo thought as he lowered his speed so that he would become perceptible to the gate guards before he arrived there. Arriving in front of the gate guard, Kazuo merely gave the man a nod, who quickly identified Kazuo and allowed him in. All gate guards were chakra sensors and had already learned the chakra signature of almost every Hidden Leaf ninja that was Chunin and above in rank. It was a measure taken so that the high-ranking ninja with important missions wouldn't be held back at the gates. Going past the green gates, Kazuo didn't stop for a second as he continued to use the body flicker once more and head directly to the Hokage Tower. If the mission went normally, then he would have instead gone to his sensei first. However, considering the irregularities that had occurred, he had no choice but to report to the Hokage first. Chapter 107. Arriving at the Hokage Tower in mere seconds, Kazuo quickly headed inside before appearing right in front of the desk receptionist. Usually, shinobi behind desk jobs were Chunin, and Kazuo had already reached a speed of the movement that surpassed the perception abilities of a Chunin, causing the woman behind the desk to be taken aback in surprise as Kazuo appeared in front of her, as if he had just spawned from the very air in the office. "Hello, I'm Chunin Kazuo. I have come back from a mission just now, however some major complications arose. I need to report to Lord Hokage, Kazuo said, his tone of voice clearly giving an image of a shinobi who had just come back from a horrendous experience. Thankfully, the ninja behind the desk seemed to pick this foe that Kazuo put forward and quickly went ahead to inform the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. As soon as she came back, she quickly motioned to Kazuo that he was free to head towards the Hokage office and meet Hiruzen. Kazuo didn't bother with walking through the stairs and instead simply used the body flicker jutsu to head towards the office, which was on the fourth and top floor of the Hokage building. Arriving before the large brown oak door, Kazuo quickly knocked twice before waiting for permission. "You can come in," the aged voice of Sarutobi said from the other side. Walking inside, Kazuo quickly closed the door behind him before walking to the middle of the room and giving the Hoki a deep bow. Chunin Kazuo comes back from his promotion mission. The mission has been completed successfully, however there were major complications, Kazuo said whilst he still kept the bow. "You may raise your head, Kazuo. Report to me exactly what happened," Hiruzen ordered, causing Kazuo to quickly straighten his back and look at the so-called god of shinobi. A title that Kazuo frankly thought was tainted when given to someone like Hiruzen. Quickly giving the man a nod of his head, Kazuo started recounting the entire mission without missing a single detail. Arriving at the morning where Kasuke had given him the poison ration bar, Kazuo took it out from his ninja bag and presented it to Hiruzen. "This is what Chunin Kasuke gave me in the morning when I woke up," Kazuo said as he looked at Hiruzen, whose face had clearly changed expressions. If before Hiruzen looked calm, now he had quite the obvious frown on his face. "I'll take this and ask for it to be investigated. Continue with the report." "Continue to be investigated? You already know who was after me, you old fuck. I am definitely supporting the Uchiha-ku, you old bastard," Kazuo thought inwardly whilst giving a nod outwardly. Continuing with the report, everything seemed normal at least until Kazuo arrived at the where he had killed Kasuke. At this point, Kazuo lied. He didn't report it at all and instead simply skimmed past it and continued until the meeting with Kakuzu. "Kakuzu? I don't think I've heard of him," Sarutobi said in return, his expression clearly confused. "Ah, so that fucker stayed hidden? Couldn't you be more infamous?" "You could be right," Kazuo thought to himself as he thought back to the bastard who had killed him hundreds of times. He was extremely strong, Lord Hokage. His strength was most definitely at the S rank, Kazuo said in reply. "S rank? Are you sure?" Hiruzen immediately questioned, his posture showing that he wasn't taking this lightly at all. An S-rank rogue bounty hunter could create a huge risk to every mission where high-value Konoha shinobi were sent on. "Yes, thankfully I managed to outsmart him in battle and finally kill him after a tough struggle," Kazuo replied in return, his expression staying calm and his tone of voice completely nonchalant. For a moment, silence enveloped the room as Hiruzen processed the words he had just heard inside his brain. In what looked like slow motion, Kazuo saw Hiruzen's thin eyes widen further and further. His satisfaction grew with each millimeter that the eyes widened by. "You killed him?" Hiruzen questioned, his voice clearly showing that the man had been caught off guard and was obviously quite shocked. "Yes, sir, I even have his head right here. Considering his S-rank strength, I thought that he would have quite the bounty on his head," Kazuo said in reply as he motioned to his wrist guard on his left arm. "Show me," Hiruzen said, causing Kazuo to nod and unseal the head out. The blood had yet to clot as the head had been sealed quickly, and as such quite a large mess was made on the floor of the Hokage office as large amounts of blood continued to spew out of the severed head. "You didn't burn the wound?" Hiruzen questioned as his right eye twitched. "No, sir, this is the first time that I've sliced someone's head and then sealed it. I thought it would have already clotted up," Kazuo said in reply, his voice sounding as if he was clearly pained by the fact that he had caused such a huge mess in front of the Hokage. "Seal it in a scroll and give it to me. I'll have someone check if he had a bounty on his head or who he was," Hiruzen replied before releasing a shallow sigh. "Yes, sir," Kazuo replied before taking out a small sealing scroll that was only as large as his pinky finger out of his ninja bag and quickly sealed the head. It was an advanced sealing scroll that he couldn't even start imagining about creating, however he had his own cheat code. Kushina Uzumaki had taken quite a liking to him these days, and so he could ask her for just about anything in regards to sealing. Placing the scroll on the desk, Kazuo took a few steps back and got back into his straight posture. After that, I simply ran back to Konoha at the quickest speed that I could achieve, Kazuo said, his hands behind his back. I see, your report was quite detailed, Chunin Kazuo, Hiruzen said, though Kazuo had the sinking feeling that the man was going to end the sentence with a "but," Hiruzen said as his eyes quickly turned to face Kazuo once more. I don't think someone that put poison in your rations would stay still after the poison showed so effect. You don't think that, you actually think that the root ninja wouldn't stay still after that fact, you old fucker. Kazuo thought before releasing a sigh and immediately activating what little left of his chakra he had to kill himself once more. Following the exact same motions as before, Kazuo arrived at the office once more, and once again he failed to get past that question. No matter how much he tried, Kazuo would always fail at explaining one thing or the other, which would put him in a difficult situation with the Hokage. After around 8 turns, Kazuo didn't use the body flicker to head to the Hokage's office and instead took the stairs, walking up slowly whilst he thought about how to pass this test. My lying skills just aren't up to par, there really is only one way. Kazuo thought in annoyance. This wasn't something he wanted to do, however it was necessary. Kazuo knew that the only way around it would be repeating this same interaction more than 1,000 times, and even then he didn't know if his lying skills would get good enough to fool a ninja such as Hiruzen. Opening his status panel, Kazuo used his major status point. Charisma, B, 2, Charisma, A. Alright, let's do this. Chapter 108, alright, let's give this another shot. Kazuo thought before heading inside the Hokage office once more. Kazuo went through the exact same dialogue as he had during his previous turns, the only difference being the fact that he could tell his acting was leagues beyond what it had been. His control over his emotions had grown past its previous limits, and his capability to show the emotions that he wanted had similarly grown at the same time. There were other factors that had increased as well. His likability, his ability to lead a conversation in the direction that he wanted had similarly had an improvement. All of this had led to the point where the question Hiruzen had pointed at him during the first and consecutive turns didn't appear again. Alright, I'll make sure to have everything properly investigated, Kazuo, but before that, I must give you a congratulations, though I'm sure Minato would have preferred he did it himself. Hiruzen said as a soft smile appeared on his expression. Kazuo's eyes widened slightly. He showed both joy at the words of the Hokage whilst at the same time, it was clear that he wasn't proud of the news he was about to receive. He looked like a man who felt like he didn't deserve a reward after his teammate had been killed. I'm sure that you might not feel like this reward is deserved, however let me tell you, Jonin Kazuo, your advancement to this rank is deserved. Not many shinobi could go against an S-rank foe and survive whilst at the same time being under attack from a teammate. Hiruzen said as he got up from his chair and walked around the desk before arriving in front of Kazuo. So stand proud as elite shinobi, Jonin Kazuo. I, as the leader of this village, am extremely proud that young ninja like you devote yourself to this village and the people living in it. Hiruzen's voice was soft, almost as if he was a grandfather praising his own grandson after they had just graduated from school. Thank you, Lord Hokage, your words mean a lot to me. I'll continue trying my best so that this village may prosper even further and that the next generation will have an easier time. Kazuo replied, his voice almost cracking whilst his eyes slightly moistened. Hiruzen's smile widened slightly before he gave Kazuo a pat on the shoulder. Now you can go. I'm sure Minato will be pleased to hear that you come back. Yes, sir, have a nice day. Kazuo replied before giving another 90-degree bow to the man. After which he turned around and walked outside of the office and then continued to walk to the outside of the Hokage building. Once outside, Kazuo took a long deep breath, holding it for a moment before releasing it slowly. I'm finally not fodder. Kazuo thought to himself as his memories seemed to flash past his eyes. From the first day when he had woken up in an unknown tent, all the way up to his fight with Kakuzu. I should be celebrating, however, considering the future, Kazuo mumbled before releasing a soft shallow sigh. He was too far away from actual safety. Jonin was a high rank, At this point he would be considered one of the elites in the Leaf Army. However, in the grand scheme of things, he was merely an unknown fodder still, maybe not at this point in time, but if he didn't grow stronger than by the time of the Fourth Great Ninja War, even a clone Zetsu would be as strong if not stronger than him. Let's first go meet Minato, after which I should go and inform Hisashi about the advancement. The wedding should be near, Kazuo thought as he continued walking through the leaf roads. Now that the war was over, the village had started investing into rebuilding itself more and more as each day passed. Before, the Leaf had a multitude of dirt roads, but by now most if not all of them were under repairs and were being turned into stone roads. There were similarly countless apartments being built around the village as the population growth spiked quite significantly after the announcement that the war was over. Most of the ninja who had already grown past their prime had decided to finally settle down and start their own family. After around half an hour, Kazuo finally arrived at his destination. It was a small house, but it was situated in one of the best areas of the village. The yellow flash and the red habaneros sure are loaded, Kazuo thought to himself as he walked to the door. Before he could even knock, it was opened up. Looking at the red-haired woman wearing an apron whilst holding a spatula, Kazuo felt nothing really. Kushina had been annoying him to no end most days. Her fiery demeanor and attitude were a complete contrast to Kazuo's desires. Some say opposites attract. Kazuo would call those people dumbass. "Hello Kushina-san, is Minato-senpai here?" Kazuo asked as he gave the woman a slight bow. Whether it was the increase in charisma or maybe it was just one of those days, Kazuo couldn't get angry or frustrated anymore. He simply felt like it was a waste of energy. However, there was a noticeable difference. If before Kazuo had a lot of trouble faking some emotions like gratitude, then now it was as easy as switching the light switch. And it was clear that Kushina was eating his lies as if they were cupcakes. Her eyes curled upwards whilst she gave Kazuo a large smile. "Yeah, he's inside with Kakashi, Obito, and Rin. Come in. I'm just about done with making the food," Kushina said as she turned around and headed back towards the kitchen. Kazuo gave a light nod before taking his sandals off and leaving them in the shoe drawer and then closing the door and walking inside. The house had grown even more friendly if he had to put a name to the change. Minato had stopped his monitoring of Kazuo a while back and had started to completely accept Kazuo into his inner circle. As for Kakashi, Obito, and Rin, they had never even suspected Kazuo. Their trust had been easy enough to gain. Simply save them in a dangerous encounter and it was a done deal. Kazuo had thought that Kakashi would be a tough nut to crack, but he found out that he was just a jaded kid, nothing more. "Kazuo, you're back," Rin said as she stood up from the couch. Obito and Kakashi merely turned their heads to look at Kazuo. One looked uninterested, though his gaze clearly showed a different emotion, whilst the other looked annoyed beyond belief at the sight of Kazuo. Minato, who sat next to Rin, stood up as well, giving Kazuo a light wave. "So how did the mission go?" he asked. "It went sideways, but at least I still got the promotion," Kazuo replied, bringing a hand behind his head to scratch it, showing signs that he was uncomfortable. "What happened?" Rin questioned immediately, satisfying both Obito and Kakashi, who similarly to each other felt like they couldn't ask or it would break their cool image. Minato meanwhile already had a frown on his face. Kazuo released a sigh, walked to the couch and sat down next to Kakashi. Seeing his actions, Rin and Minato similarly sat down as well. Obito and Kakashi by this time had both noticed that Kazuo wasn't joking. Their expressions had already grown much more serious. "So where do I even start?" "I'll just drop the bombs first," Kazuo said, lifting his gaze to look at his sensei. "One of my teammates was a root ninja who tried to poison me. That was easy enough to deal with, however the next problem took quite a bit of effort." At his words, Minato's frown only grew, his lips already forming a thin line. "I met a guy called Kakuzu. He was from the Hidden in the Waterfalls village, at least he used to be a part of it at some point in time. The problem, however, was that he was clearly an S-rank ninja," Kazuo continued. "An S-rank ninja?" Obito asked, immediately widening his eyes and sitting up straighter whilst looking at Kazuo in disbelief. "Yeah, thankfully he didn't anticipate my paper jutsu or I would have already been dead," Kazuo replied as he soft shook his head before continuing. Two of my teammates, the ones that weren't actually trying to kill me, were eliminated by Kakuzu. That's why this promotion doesn't really feel that great, Kazuo said, his voice lowering as he said the latter half of his sentence. None of the others gave a reply for a moment before Minato spoke up. It was deserved, Kazuo. I'm sure it wasn't easy for you either. It actually was, Minato-sensei. I even managed to kill Kakuzu. I could have escaped with my life whenever I wanted, but I wasn't strong enough to protect my teammates. Even if I have all this strength, what's it matter if I can't even protect anyone? Are we supposed to be ninjas protecting the leaf? I couldn't even protect 2 people, let alone the entire village. Kazuo spoke up, his voice clearly getting more agitated with each sentence that he spewed out before he finally took a deep breath and calmed himself back down again. Minato didn't reply, merely standing up and giving Kazuo a pat on the shoulder. You might not have been strong enough to protect them, but you were strong enough to survive to see another day, and that's enough for me as your sensei, Kazuo. It might be selfish, however, I'm glad it wasn't you who died, Minato said before walking toward the kitchen. The food's ready, come. Kushina's voice was heard calling the rest of them over a moment later. Kazuo gave a light nod. It looked more like he was giving it to himself rather than in return to Minato's words. Meanwhile, inside his mind. Charisma sure is useful. Chapter 109, the rest of the night was calm. Kazuo ate with the rest of his team and Kushina before giving his goodbyes and heading towards the Hyuga complex, where he informed Hisashi about his advancement in ninja rank, and the two continued to talk about the last remaining details regarding his marriage. Kazuo had yet to even meet the woman he would soon be married to, however he wasn't curious. The woman would at most be a piece to use, or she could similarly simply useless addition to his life. Either way, the woman had already served her main purpose before Kazuo had even met her. His relations with the Hyuga clan had already improved. It's still only the beginning stage, however, Kazuo thought as he walked back towards his apartment, the night having already fallen and the moon already shining down onto the world of supernatural ninjas. The next stage is more difficult. How do I manage to cause a rebellion inside of the Hyuga clan so that I can change its foundations of slavery? I don't exactly have anything against slavery, however it is annoying that I am in the position of the slave at this point in time. No, rather I'm in a position even lower than the slaves of the Hyuga branch. Kazuo thought in slight annoyance, however he quickly removed said emotion from his thoughts. Arriving at his apartment, he quickly headed inside and locked the door before placing a new seal on the door. The first opportunity is at the event of Hisashi's death. By that point in time 2 things are required. Minato Namikaze needs to be the Hokage, however, even then Hiruzen would most likely still influence the decision and lead to Hisashi's death once more, however this is exactly what I want, Kazuo thought as he quickly removed his battle gear. At that point, I'll assassinate every Hyuga elder and grab their eyes. This will likely turn the entire event on its head, with the leaf accusing the cloud of killing so many members of the Hyuga clan and stealing their Byakugan. After which all I need to do is assassinate an important member of the Cloud Village. Kazuo thought as a slight smile appeared on his face as he lay down on his bed. But I would need a justification for killing said Cloud Ninja, a justification that the leaf would accept whilst the Cloud wouldn't. I could do the assassination in the shadows, however I never wanted to be a shadow to begin with, Kazuo thought as his mind turned towards his newest piece on this chessboard. My wife, Kazuo thought as his smile widened further, his mind churning as it spewed out idea after idea. And so the night passed with Kazuo falling asleep eventually. It was only after 2 days that he woke up from his slumber, the after effect of eating the soldier pills. Getting up from his bed, Kazuo quickly completed his morning routine and got dressed up in casual gear. Today he would be meeting his wife for the first time, and tomorrow the wedding would be held. Thankfully I managed to wake up in time, Kazuo thought as he headed out of his apartment after quickly glancing at the time. I have around 30 minutes to arrive at the Hyuga compound, Kazuo thought as he started walking towards it rather than using the body flicker jutsu. With his increased charisma, the murmurs around him as he walked the streets of Konoha seemed to have risen as well. Good, now then I'll have to repeat this day quite a few times, Kazuo thought in slight annoyance as he arrived at the compound. For his plans to work perfectly later on, he needed to show the image of a young man captivated by the beauty of his future wife whilst at the same time managing to seduce the woman completely until she could only think and rely on him. This would have been harder said than done had Kazuo not had the time loop, however he did. Giving the image of someone who was similar to her and at the same time understanding and loving was easy when you could know everything about her before even meeting her. Would this be considered psychopathic behavior? Kazuo must to himself inwardly as he finally arrived at the Hyuga compound. The guards had already been given notice of his upcoming arrival and so they gave way immediately, giving a slight nod to Kazuo. Kazuo reciprocated the nod and gave the duo a soft smile before heading inside the clan grounds. Walking through the streets of the large clan district, Kazuo noticed that just like the civilians on the street, the Hyuga were staring at him. Most were simply curious, however he could sense the disdain on quite a few faces as they looked at him. Disdain at having me inside the clan grounds? Likely because they feel like I'm beneath them to such a degree that my mere presence here is sullying the ground. Kazuo quickly analyzed before giving a soft chuckle. After around 3 minutes of walking, Kazuo arrived in front of Hisashi's house. It seemed the man had already been waiting for him as he stood in front of the gate. "You're here, Jonin?" Kazuo. "Yes, I hope I didn't make you wait long, Hisashi-sama," Kazuo replied. The words were said flawlessly, however on the inside he felt as if his mouth was filled with some kind of sticky gunk. Having to refer to someone like Hisashi with such high respect damaged more of his ego than Kazuo had expected, however he didn't show it outwardly at all. He wouldn't let emotions interfere with his plans, even if those were his emotions and feelings. "No, you're right on time," Hisashi replied before he turned to look behind him. It was at this moment that a young woman walked to stand next to him. She had long brown hair that was tied in a ponytail with 2 bangs that slid down her face, seeming to accentuate it even more. Her complexion was pale, almost as pale as snow, quite similar to her eyes. Her figure clearly showed that the woman was a trained kunoichi, be it the way that she handled herself or the very air that surrounded her. "This is interesting," Kazuo thought inwardly whilst outwardly his eyes widened slightly, giving the image as if he was struck by the sight. The woman stared at him unabashedly before her eyes slightly twitched. "She doesn't like how struck I am with her?" Kazuo thought as he kept the information in mind for the next turn. "This is Saori Hyuga. She's currently a special Jonin." Hisashi introduced the woman, who gave a shallow bow and greeting to Kazuo, who quickly reciprocated. "Pleasure to meet you, Saori-san." Kazuo, no surname." "A Jonin." Kazuo replied as he gave his own greeting. The woman merely gave a slight nod in turn as she walked closer to Kazuo before standing in front of him. "I'll leave the rest to you two," Hisashi replied with his usual monotone voice before giving a slight nod and turning around, heading back inside the mansion, leaving Kazuo alone with a woman who clearly held disdain for him. "Even though my charisma has already reached such a high level, she holds clear disdain towards me. This is going to be slightly more annoying than I would have liked," Kazuo thought as he released a soft sigh before turning towards the woman. "So Saori-san, would you mind showing me around the clan grounds? We could also go to have something to eat. I've yet to have breakfast this morning," Kazuo said, his tone soft as he spoke. "Yes," Saori simply replied as she started walking ahead, Kazuo following behind her. Chapter 110, Yes. Saori simply replied as she started walking ahead, Kazuo following behind her. The two continued to walk in silence. The Hyuga members seemed to only get more interested compared to before when Kazuo had been walking alone. Their stares weren't even hidden anymore as most of them plainly stared at the duo. "What is it that you do usually?" Kazuo questioned as he walked alongside her. Saori didn't reply for a moment. In fact, Kazuo thought she was going to plain out ignore him for a second. "I complete the tasks and missions given by the village and the clan." "Right, well, it seems like we're similar on that point," Kazuo replied before releasing a soft sigh. Saori turned slightly to look at Kazuo. "I think we should just drop the act, Saori," Kazuo said after a moment. "Drop the act?" the woman questioned, her tone showing slight confusion. "It's clear that you aren't interested in me at this point, however we can't change our circumstances at this point in time." All I can hope for is that you can at least tolerate me, Kazuo replied as he continued walking. Saori stopped for a moment before starting to follow him. She didn't say a word in regard to what he had said. So, let's at least try to get along somewhat. I'll just start by telling you some of my likes. Maybe we have some more in common? Kazuo said, his last words sounding more like a question. I like the rain, I like the color red, and I also like barbecue, though that has gotten a bit boring as of recently. I like completing missions, it gives me a purpose. I like my friends, though there aren't a lot of them besides my teammates from Team 7 and my sensei. Altogether I live a pretty boring life for a Jonin, Kazuo said before turning toward her. What about you? I don't have anything that I particularly like, and I don't have anything that I dislike either. I do not have any sort of grand dream either, Saori replied. Did this bitch just give me the Kakashi speech? Kazuo thought as he almost lost his poker face while staring at the woman. Right, that's something, Kazuo muttered in reply before saying. Are there any good restaurants inside the clan grounds? No, that isn't something the Hyuga involve themselves with. That's boring, Kazuo replied. His words seemed to have affected her slightly as her eyes finally changed position from the usual poker face. Boring? A ninja clan shouldn't be focused on the culinary world, Saori said in turn. They shouldn't? And why is that? A ninja is simply a human at the end of the day, Kazuo replied before holding a finger. Don't the Akimichi clan pride themselves on their culinary prowess? They're quite the large and affluent ninja clan, aren't they? Kazuo questioned as his lips slightly rose. The Hyuga are a noble clan, Saori said, in turn, her expression turning even more towards a frown. I think that the Hyuga should let go of such strict rules, Kazuo replied before stopping. The two had already walked through the entire clan grounds. Turning towards Saori, Kazuo said, Clan rules are important, however those rules were made with the protection of the clansmen in mind. In times of peace, the people of this clan should have the ability to enjoy themselves, and good food certainly would help in that endeavor. That isn't something for me to think about. I am merely a lowly branch member. Is that so? Kazuo said as his lips rose even further. Now he had what appeared like a soft smile on his face. I'll leave it at that. I learned nothing about this woman, returning back in time won't even change anything, Kazuo thought in slight annoyance. Though I made her think about the current situation in the clan, it's at least a start, Kazuo thought before nodding his head. Well, we've already walked through the clan grounds. I am thankful that you gave me a tour. We'll meet again tomorrow for our wedding, Saori-san, Kazuo said. Yes, until tomorrow, Kazuo-san, Saori replied with a slight nod of her head. Her expression had already turned back into the poker face she had kept up for almost the entire tour. Giving her another nod, Kazuo circulated his chakra almost instantly and employed the body flicker jutsu, disappearing from the street instantly. Saori felt her own eyes widen as she saw him disappear. Fast. I couldn't even see him at all. In less than a second, Kazuo had already appeared on a roof outside of the Hyuga clan grounds. Tomorrow the marriage should be done and over with, after which I should get started with my bloodline mission whilst at the same time starting to slowly introduce ideas to Saori. At the same time, I should keep my vigilance against Danzo. It's unknown what he will do. He could possibly even try an assassination tomorrow to cause a disturbance and make the Hyuga clan lose influence and turn Minato against them, Kazuo thought as he disappeared from view once more, appearing hundreds of meters away and continuing to use the body to flicker until he reached the training grounds. Hours passed like this before Kazuo finished his daily training and headed back into the village. He had agreed to meet with Team 7 to have dinner together at Minato's house, and so after a quick shower inside his apartment, he headed towards the house. Arriving inside, Kazuo quickly started talking with the rest of Team 7, describing his meeting with Saori. She sounds like Kakashi. I feel bad for you, Kazuo, Obito said before Kushina, who had been next to him, gave him a hard slap on the back of his head. Shut your mouth, Obito. She sounds like a lovely lady, Kazuo. I'm sure that you two will figure it out together, Kushina said in turn. Right, I do hope so, Kazuo muttered in turn. Anyways, I've gotten a mission for next week. Do any of you wish to join the team? Minato asked. A mission, sensei? Kakashi questioned almost immediately. Right, it's about investigating some ancient ruins and helping someone arrive there safely. I can't say any more without you joining the team. A ruin? An escort mission as well, could it be? Kazuo thought as his mood significantly improved almost instantly. I guess it's time to learn about the future, isn't it? With that thought, Kazuo crossed his arms and with an eager expression immediately said, I want to join sensei. Chapter 111, I want to participate in the mission, sensei. Kazuo immediately said as he looked at Minato. You want to join the mission? Are you sure, Kazuo? Your wedding is tomorrow. I don't think it's a good idea. Minato replied whilst raising an eyebrow in confusion at his sudden enthusiasm. The rest of Team 7 and Kushina turned their attention towards Kazuo as well. I know, sensei, however, we likely won't be having a lot of missions together anymore, and I just wanted to at least be part of as many as possible. You're becoming Hokage soon, right? Kazuo replied whilst his expression turned slightly downtrodden. Hokage? Obito questioned aloud as he turned to Minato, who simply raised a hand and scratched the back of his head. You're certainly perceptive, Kazuo. That's right, this is likely my last mission before my inauguration. Thank you, so am I allowed to join, sensei? Kazuo asked with a slight smile that seemed to show both sadness as well as joy at the same time. It was a difficult expression to make, or at least to act out. So this much is possible now. Kazuo thought inwardly. Yes, I'll explain the rest of the mission details next week when we start. Meet up with me at 7 am at the gates next Monday. Yes, sensei. With that said and done, the conversation continued, Kakashi and Obito deciding to join as well whilst Rin was still continuing her training in the hospital and so had no time to join. Obito's inclusion will certainly be interesting. It would be easier to see if the future has changed or if it is just a special timeline of sorts where I do exist, but in that future, I do not. Kazuo thought to himself before getting back into the conversation that continued until it was almost midnight. Giving his goodbyes to the rest of Team 7 and Kushina, Kazuo returned to his apartment once more. The night passed quickly. Kazuo had already mastered the art of falling asleep on command, though it certainly wasn't a heavy sleep. At most it was light sleep, and at the least, it was as if he was half conscious and half asleep at the same time. Still, it did the job of recovering his mental faculties as well as his physical body. Before the sun even rose above the horizon, Kazuo got up and completed his daily routine, and finished some light body training. Getting dressed in a suit that he had bought, he quickly headed out and used the body flicker to arrive at the Hyuga clan district in seconds. Arriving in front of the gates, he was quickly led inside and then walked towards the branch head's mansion. Kazuo, you're here, Hisashi said as Kazuo opened the sliding wooden door to his office. That's right, I can't be late on such a day. Hisashi merely nodded his head before motioning for Kazuo to sit down. Taking a seat on the floor in front of the man, Kazuo maintained the silence whilst waiting for the man to finish what he had already been doing before Kazuo had arrived. Finally, after a few minutes, Hisashi finished working on some documents and lifted his gaze to look at Kazuo. I'm sorry about the wait, I had to finish some urgent work. Now then, I'll get a maid to guide you to your waiting quarters, after which you will be called forth for the ceremony in a few hours. After those processes, as we discussed, you will be gaining the status of a pseudo-Hyuga, gaining the Hyuga surname, and will be granted a house where you will be residing. Hisashi stated as he raised a hand. Without even giving out a vocal order, a maid came inside the room and gave a bow to both Hisashi and Kazuo. Take him away, Kuina. Yes, Hisashi-sama. With those words, the maid turned toward Kazuo, who gave a nod towards Hisashi and got up from his seated position. Well, then I'll be going. Hisashi merely gave a nod in return before turning his attention back toward the documents in front of him. Following the maid, as she walked through the different hallways of the large mansion, Kazuo felt like he was inside a maze of sorts. Is it some kind of seal? Kazuo wondered. It's very likely. I have good perception and memory, however, I'm feeling like my sense of direction is becoming more blurry as we walk. Kazuo thought inwardly, his curiosity piqued. Finally, after what felt like a much too long time to simply traverse a mansion, Kazuo arrived in front of a small sliding door. This will be your room for the moment. Please wait until I come to get you once more, Kazuo-sama. There will be another maid who will be helping you get ready for the ceremony. I see, thank you, Kazuo muttered in turn before opening the door and heading inside. The inside of the room was beyond plain, with it only having a tatami floor and a mirror situated on the left wall. Sitting in front of the mirror, Kazuo closed his eyes as he waited in meditation. It was better to keep his mind as calm as possible and his body just as ready for any unexpected events that might occur. After around an hour, the door slid open, and a new maid came inside. She simply gave Kazuo a bow before taking out a traditional Japanese black kimono with a hakama as well as a large black haori with the clan symbol of the Hyuga clan embroidered on it. Getting up from his position, Kazuo relaxed his body as the maid helped him wear the clothing. Finally finished with that much, she quickly gave Kazuo another deep 90-degree bow before heading out of the room. It was only after another 2 hours that the first maid came back in. It was time for the wedding ceremony. Following the woman, Kazuo found himself walking through the maze of hallways once more. He finally arrived in front of a large sliding door. In front of the sliding door was his soon-to-be wife wearing completely white clothes. Walking to stand next to her, Kazuo kept his eyes forward toward the sliding door instead of staring at Saori. The sliding doors were opened after a minute, letting in the sunshine as well as the sounds of the people who were attending the wedding. There were two groups, and it was clear to see who had come for Kazuo and who was part of the Hyuga clan. The loudest ones were there for Kazuo, whilst the ones with a stick up their ass were there for the political marriage alone. Kazuo Hyuga sounds decent enough. Chapter 112, the wedding proceeded well. In fact, for a while, Kazuo had been on edge. Everything was going as planned, there were no ambushes at all. Is fate finally giving up on its mission to kill me? Kazuo thought as he was pronounced husband to Saori Hyuga. The latter part of the day was spent with him having to get situated in his new house. It was a medium-sized home located around the edge of the Hyuga district. The reason as to why he had been placed on the edge was clear, considering he wouldn't really be considered a Hyuga to any of the actual members. That didn't mean that the surname came with no benefits. Kazuo would certainly gain support if something unexpected happened. The higher his standing in the village rose, the higher his standing in the Hyuga would as well. This entire thing was a simple exchange after all. Though they surely want to gain more from me than I will gain from them. Kazuo thought as a slight smirk appeared on his face whilst placing the last of his clothes in the drawer in his new bedroom. Turning towards Saori, who was similarly doing the same on the other side of the room, Kazuo simply stared for a moment before the smirk on his face vanished without a trace. It will certainly be annoying. She's likely going to be reporting everything to the Hyuga for at least a while until I can gain some kind of emotional value on her. Kazuo thought inwardly before saying, I'll be leaving for a mission next Monday with Minato sensei. I see, Saori replied in a monotone voice. Just thought that I should let you know beforehand. Similarly, if you need help with anything, just ask. I'll try my best to aid you. Kazuo replied before turning around and sitting on the large king-sized bed. It was honestly quite luxurious. Though his standing was low, the Hyuga clearly wasn't lacking in funds and wanted to at least superficially treat him well. It wouldn't do if Kazuo complained to Minato after all. Hours passed until it was already late at night. The two got into bed and quickly fell asleep, or at least Kazuo tried to, whilst Saori managed it flawlessly. Sleeping next to someone is quite hard, Kazuo thought as he found out a new thing that would annoy him to no end before his body adapted. He was used to only sleeping close to people whilst on the battlefield, and as such, his body treated this encounter the same, causing him to unconsciously tense up, leading him to a state of pseudo-insomnia. Sigh. Releasing a barely audible sigh, Kazuo turned his body and closed his eyes once more. This would be a long night. The following days passed by swiftly, Kazuo having returned to his daily routine once more. Though his meals at home had changed quite significantly. It seemed that Saori Hyuga was quite the cook. Definitely a waste of talent, Kazuo thought as he remembered the fact that the Hyuga were completely opposed to joining the culinary business. Though his life had slightly changed for the better, it hadn't changed much overall. His conversations with his new wife were rather short and didn't include anything that could consist of a secret at all. It was clear as day to both him and Saori that they weren't trusting enough of each other to share anything of interest, though both understood that it was merely a natural outcome. They had only met one day before their wedding. Finally, after 1 week, on Monday, Kazuo woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning. Quickly dressed himself whilst trying to stay as silent as possible. However, not waking up Saori was impossible. "You're heading to the mission?" she questioned. This was one of the few times that the woman started a conversation with Kazuo. "That's right. I don't know for how long I'll be gone, and neither do I have any of the mission details, so I won't really be able to know," Kazuo replied as he started walking towards the door of the bedroom. "Good luck," Saori mumbled before turning on her side once more and closing her eyes. "Thanks." With those words, Kazuo headed out of the bedroom and into the small backyard of their house, where he completed his morning taijutsu kata practice, both as a way to further improve and to warm his body up so that it would respond to his commands if something unexpected were to pop up. Finally, after around 40 minutes at 4:55 am, Kazuo used the body flicker. He wasn't hurried and stopped for a while to walk through the remaining distance, and at 5 am, he arrived at the gates of the Hidden Leaf Village. He still had 2 hours before the mission started. However, he usually arrived ahead of time, so that he could prepare himself mentally while meditating. 1.5 hours later, Kazuo opened his eyes once more. Minato Namikaze had arrived together with Obito Uchiha and Kakashi Hatake. "Seems like you've managed to escape black cat sightings, Obito," Kazuo said with a smirk as he jumped down from the tree branch he had been sitting on. "Yeah, it's the first time," Obito replied before stopping for a moment. "You're making fun of me, aren't you?" "Me? Making fun of you? I could never," Kazuo replied with an exaggerated tone. "This handsome bastard," Obito muttered under his breath as his hands slightly shook. However, to Kazuo's eyes it was clear as day that it was merely an act. An act that Obito had been keeping up these days. The Obito that he was trying to tell others existed was long gone. "Well, since everyone is here, let's get started early. I'll tell you the mission details on the road." Things have already changed quite a lot from the movie, Kazuo thought as he used a body flicker to follow Minato. Previously, the mission participants were Minato Namikaze, Shibi Aburame, Choza Akimichi, and Kakashi Hatake. However, this time it's Minato Namikaze, Obito Uchiha, Kakashi Hatake, and I, Kazuo Hyuga. Kazuo thought to himself as a slight smile appeared on his face. Finally, after a few minutes, when the group was quite a fair distance away from the village, Minato slowed down his pace. The mission consists of stopping the plans of a man by the name of Amrokuzen. He plans to use the chakra stored in the underground chakra veins at the Roaran Palace to create an army strong enough to dominate the world, Minato said before taking a slight break to make sure that everyone had heard him and then continuing. "Our mission is simple, infiltrate and assassinate, though that's only if the man has yet to manage to gain access to the chakra veins. If that has come true, then we will need to seal those chakra veins together with the entire palace," Minato said before closing his mouth, he debriefing of the mission requirements done. "Amrokuzen, huh? I don't really remember the movie at all much, so this should be interesting," Kazuo thought before stopping, a sudden idea coming to his mind. "Wait, doesn't my bloodline mission need me to gather a vial of blood from a bloodline related to time?" Chapter 113. Unfortunately, I don't have any information about how this will go. I barely remember the movie, so I guess you can say that this is the first time I'm going in fully blind in a mission that appeared in the series, Kazuo thought to himself as he continued using the Shunshin Jutsu to follow behind the team. His mind was overflowing with thoughts, but the entire thing didn't cause any stress to Kazuo. He knew he couldn't ever die, really, and that was quite the calming thought if Kazuo were honest with himself. His ability had already become an integral part of him, so much so that it had changed the way he thought completely. If before, Kazuo had been afraid of death, afraid of harming himself, then now, it was more thoughts of how he could use his death as a means to gain a boon of some sort in whatever situation he found himself in. The trip was quite long, with them having to take multiple breaks whilst heading toward the so-called ruins. It was only 3 days later that they arrived. When they did, they found themselves in front of a large stone gate behind which stood the people of Roaran as well as Anrokuzen, the antagonist of the movie who had infiltrated and slowly gained power over the royalty of this small kingdom of sorts. Minato stopped and turned towards the group, his eyes clearly showing that he was in his mission mode. There would be no jokes or anything of the sort. The mission completion stood at the forefront of his mind. With a simple hand motion, Minato told the rest of them to quickly infiltrate, whilst he did the same. With a quick nod of their heads, Kazuo, Obito, and Kakashi vanished from their spots and headed inside after opening the gate only a slight sliver. Their chakra is already almost completely suppressed, making their chakra sensory abilities almost useless against them. Kazuo headed straight, whilst Obito and Kakashi each chose a side to infiltrate. Using the body flicker, Kazuo appeared in the middle of the settlement. It was honestly quite surprising. The large gates had been on the side of a small mountain, however. Once inside, it was clear that this place was under the effects of some kind of space ceiling or the sort, as the area inside clearly was larger than the entire mountain could have been. In the middle of this area stood a large black stone tower. That must be where the main events will be happening, Kazuo thought as he immediately heard the sounds of combat from the east. Naruto and the rest must already be here. Kazuo thought as he muted his presence even more before making a shadow clone and directing it toward the sounds of combat, whilst he headed straight toward the tower. He had a different mission to complete. I either need Anrokuzen's blood or the blood of the royalty here. That might work, Kazuo thought to himself as he continued to use the body flicker until he arrived at the large tower. There were hundreds of windows besides the small gate at the bottom, and as such Kazuo decided it was best to enter through those rather than the main gate. Jumping tens of meters into the air, and landing on the small hinge of a window silently, Kazuo quickly made a single-hand seal and placed his hand against the window. His hand quickly heated up to hundreds of degrees in less than a second, causing the glass to quickly melt, allowing him entry into the tower. Once inside, he found himself inside of a large hallway with a room in front of him and a pair of staircases on each side of him, one that went upwards whilst the other downward. I'm guessing that the royal room is at the top of this place, Kazuo thought before making another shadow clone silently and having it search the rooms quietly whilst he headed towards the top of the tower at the highest speed he could manage whilst being hidden. It was at this moment that a surge of information entered his mind. Minato had already met up with Naruto, and now the groups had split up once more, having to fight a large amount of puppets. That should be Anrokuzen's ability, Kazuo thought to himself as he continued on his way. Finally, after around an entire minute of using the body flicker, Kazuo arrived in front of a large, towering door at the top of the long tower. Taking out a military pill, he quickly swallowed it before heading inside. Creating two shadow clones had caused quite a noticeable drain on his reserves. Usually, he wouldn't have minded, however it was best to prepare as thoroughly as possible when against an unknown threat. Opening the gates silently, Kazuo quickly slipped in. Once inside, he saw a man sitting atop a throne at the end of the chamber room he had found himself in. The man was wearing a grayish, almost white outfit with a turban on his head. He had brown shaggy hair and a brown beard together with a mustache. His eyes made him almost look saddened and gave the man an innocent look. However, his deep black eyes seemed almost crazed, completely contradicting such a look. That's Anrokuzen, huh? Kazuo thought to himself before giving a shrug of his shoulders and using the body flicker. Besides the man stood two large puppets that seemed to have been made out of some chakra metal. However, those weren't much of a problem in Kazuo's eyes. Appearing in front of the man in less than a fraction of a second, Kazuo quickly produced a syringe that he plunged into the man's neck. Anrokuzen's eyes widened as he stared in shock. However, it was over before he could do anything. Kazuo quickly filled the syringe with the man's blood before using the body flicker to disappear from view once more, having already left the chambers before Anrokuzen could even move an inch. I want to see how this proceeds. If something goes wrong because of my interference, then I could simply turn back time to this moment and end it prematurely, Kazuo thought to himself as he stood a few floors below from where he had been merely moments earlier. Taking out the syringe filled with blood, Kazuo opened the system menu and headed to the mission segment. Bloodline Mission 0/3. Kazuo stared at it for a moment before furrowing his brows. How do I even know this is the blood I need? Maybe it's not, however, what if it is? Do I have to inject myself with it? Kazuo thought as his brain started processing the information he had at an unbelievable speed. No, I think it's not it. Kakuzu himself didn't hold any abilities related to time, he merely used the chakra of this place to cause this time distortion, and he clearly needed the royalty, and if so, then the correct blood should be that of the princess instead of his. Kazuo thought to himself before releasing a sigh of frustration. Chapter 114, Body flickering constantly, Kazuo arrives on top of a building on the edges of the city. Placing a hand on the roof tiles, he quickly ran his chakra in a set of motions, activating the tremor sense jutsu seamlessly. Closing his eyes, Kazuo focused, trying to find his team among all the different small vibrations that were being sensed by the jutsu. It wasn't hard as he focused most of his attention on only two locations. The first was the tower and the second was a large factory on the east side. There, at the factory, Kazuo thought before opening his eyes instantly and using the body flicker once more, causing his figure to vanish instantly from his previous location. With impressive speed, he arrived at the front gates of the factory in less than 5 seconds. Finding the gates open and hearing a scream from inside, Kazuo didn't bother maintaining stealth anymore and simply headed inside. There he found quite an interesting group. Minato Namikaze, Kakashi Hatake, Obito Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, Tenzo, or as he's called Yamato, and finally the most interesting difference. Sasuke Uchiha instead of Sai. Well, isn't that an interesting change? Kazuo thought as he held back a slight smirk before using the body flicker and appearing next to Minato. As soon as he appeared, the group quickly turned to face him. The only two people who had yet to notice his appearance were Sarah, the queen of this place, as well as Makade, or as he was known at this time, Kakuzu. What are you? Naruto almost shouted before he was stopped by Yamato, placing a hand on his mouth. Stop, Naruto, you can't say anything, we could irreversibly damage the timeline, Yamato whispered, causing the young ninja to nod his head slightly whilst he clenched his fist. Who are you? I don't remember any leaf shinobi who resemble you, Kazuo said instead of minding what Yamato had whispered. Minato turned toward Kazuo slightly whilst still keeping the queen and Kakuzu in his sight. I'll explain later, this isn't the time. Kazuo merely gave a nod in reply before turning his attention toward the two who were having a heated argument once more. Well, it could be said that Sarah was, as Kakuzu appeared to be completely calm. You were only a puppy that I used, and now you think that you can stop me? Kakuzu said in a sneering tone. How could you? I trusted you. TCH. Kakuzu merely made a sking sound before lifting his hand. At that moment hundreds of puppets appeared at the same time all around them. I'll take care of it, sensei, you all should deal with him and the queen, Kazuo replied as he stepped forward. Minato merely gave a nod, and Kakashi and Obito followed suit. Strangely, the future Konoha ninja didn't mind either. Guessing from Naruto's reaction, I must have done something against the leaf in the future, am curious what would be worth giving up my allegiance to the leaf? Kazuo wondered to himself as he pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, summoning a short blade into his hand. Kakuzu could be seen already running away from the group, with Sarah having been kidnapped by a puppet who was running away together with the man. The rest of the ninjas quickly started following the man, however it seemed his speed was almost tremendous, likely an effect of his having control over the Ryumayaku. Seeing them disappear, Kazuo is left behind with the rest of roughly 150 ninja puppets. Well, then shall we get started? Kazuo mumbled before creating 2 shadow clones. The military pill he had eaten before was still in effect and his chakra started regenerating rapidly. Without saying another word, Kazuo and his 2 shadow clones used the body flicker and vanished, appearing next to a puppet in an instant. With a clean slash, the puppet lost its head where the main chakra point was. the place where the Ryumaika chakra started, and then ran through the rest of the puppet's body, allowing Anrokuzen to completely control them. 1, 2, 3, 15, 60, 100, and finally all 156 puppets were down. By the end, Kazuo had to dispel his shadow clones as he had used too much chakra, his reserves already almost completely drained. He had even used another military pill, so using a third one wasn't a wise choice. Even having used 2 already, he would be facing some repercussions after the effects completely wore off in a few hours. And they said to not use them as I'm already close to addiction, I might already be addicted now, Kazuo thought to himself as he plopped down onto the ground and released a sigh. It was at this moment that the whole ground underneath him started shaking. It was coming from the west, in the center of this place where the tower stood. I guess the final battle started. It seems like there have been some major changes to this part of the story, Kazuo mumbled to himself. I don't think it was finished quite this easily in the movie, Kazuo said to himself as he used his hands to help lift him up from the ground. He still had something to do before joining the group. I know that Minato seals everyone's memories. I can't let that happen, Kazuo thought to himself before looking at his ninja bag. I'm sorry to whoever medical ninja gets to treat me. With that thought, he grabbed a third ninja pill and ate it. Feeling his chakra start regenerating at an impressive speed once more, Kazuo showed a slight smirk before creating a final shadow clone and making it hide its chakra before hiding itself. Dusting himself off, Kazuo quickly fixed his appearance before using the body flicker to arrive at the tower. There he saw it, a giant puppet golem of sorts. Minato and Naruto could be seen together as they made a Rasengan. Its coloring, however, differed from the regular blue, and it instead appeared to be a light green cyan mix. Appearing next to the others, Kazuo merely gave a light smile as he sat down next to Obito. Couldn't you simply use that jutsu to sever Anrokuzen out of the golem? Kazuo asked Obito. I could, however, that's a last resort, Obito replied. I see. Well, it seems like we won't need it either way, Kazuo replied as he saw Naruto and Minato slam the special Rasengan into the giant puppet. Chapter 115, the special Cyan Rasengan slammed into the gigantic puppet construct, sending it flying down to the ground, causing a huge earthquake to shake the entire area. That sure is impressive. I can't imagine how much chakra one would need to be able to control something like that. Even if it was made entirely of chakra-conductive metal, which it clearly isn't, it would need at least the chakra of Naruto. The Ryumayaku is more impressive than I thought, Kazuo thought to himself as he stared at the duo of father and son standing on top of the now fallen puppet. Well then, I guess it's time we end this mission, Kazuo said with a small chuckle as his body flickered next to Minato. Do I get rid of him, sensei? Kazuo asked as he turned to stare at him. Minato merely gave a light nod in confirmation. With that done, Kazuo turned towards the head of the metal golem of sorts and immediately started making hand signs. This jutsu is a bit new, but it should still be functional, Kazuo thought as he finished waving his hand signs. Water release, water manipulation. It was a jutsu that Kazuo had created on his own. It wasn't much of a jutsu as of now, as it had an extremely long set of signs to be used in combat. However, it gave Kazuo a frightening control over water. There were other downsides as well. Firstly, the speed of the water was not great and any Gennin would be able to dodge, and in the same manner, the strength was weak enough that it would do no damage to most people at all. However, in this scenario, it was useful. Spewing water out of his mouth, Kazuo quickly took control of it, making it float in the air. Creating water from scratch with his chakra was quite intensive. One of the major downsides of the water element is something that could only be subsided if one had an extreme affinity to water. An example would be Tobirama Senju, who could gather the molecules in the air to form water. Kazuo controlled the water and slowly sent it inside of the golem's head. It went through the tiny crevices and cracks until it arrived at Anrokuzen, who was unconscious. The water slowly but surely surrounded his mouth and nose before going inside his body. This process caused the man to wake up, however it was much too late. He died by having water overflow inside of him, his body having been enlarged by the large amounts of water. Kazuo didn't stop, however. I wonder if this is possible, Kazuo thought curiously as he continued to send more and more water until finally, the man's body exploded in a shower of blood and guts. Interesting, I guess people can explode from water too. Kazuo thought with a light smile that he quickly hid before turning around to face the others. The rest of the leaf ninjas were already there talking to Minato. Their bodies, however, were already shining a bright yellow color as it appeared like they were vanishing into particles of light. "Seems like you're returning," Kazuo said as he walked to them. "It does seem so," Minato replied before facing everyone and saying with a calm voice. "It is best that I seal everyone's memories of this event, it could cause fatal changes." "Right," Kakashi replied with a serious face whilst Obito looked ready to simply head to bed already, clearly bored at having done nothing. "He sure has changed," Kazuo thought to himself as he gave a nod to his sensei. Minato nodded as he started waving hand seals. Finally, after a set of 100 signs, he was done with the sealing jutsu. "Come close," Minato said, every one of them following him as they surrounded him in a half-circle. It was only the people of the present that did so, as the future versions had already almost disappeared and they had no need to have their memories sealed either way. Finally, Minato mumbled a strange jutsu name. It was too long for Kazuo to even want to remember. He really should start rethinking those names. Actually, never mind, it might only make it worse. Kazuo thought in slight annoyance as a wave of chakra went through his mind, causing it to go blank for a moment. A similar thing happened to the rest of them, Kakashi, Obito, and Minato included. As this was happening, the future Leaf Shinobi simply watched as they were about to disappear. It was at this moment that everyone wasn't paying attention, and another person showed up. It was Kazuo's shadow clone. With speed rivaling that of Minato's body flicker, he appeared next to Sarah, the future queen of Roan, and quickly plunged a syringe into her neck, filling it up with her blood in an instant before disappearing. The Konoha shinobi reacted quickly, however it was much too late, as Kazuo had already disappeared. "Who was that?" Yamato questioned whilst Sakura asked in anxiety. "Are you alright, Sarah?" "I don't know, we haven't seen him before." Kazuo had used a transformation jutsu to change his appearance before arriving, making it impossible for them to learn who it had been. Even if Sasuke could see through the jutsu, Kazuo had attacked much too quickly and suddenly. Before they could warn the current time Leaf Ninja, their bodies completely turned into yellow particles as they went back to their own timeline. It was only a few moments later that everyone regained their consciousness. "What happened?" Kazuo questioned as he felt a mild headache. Minato, however, had already left some memories to himself so that he would know what had happened, and so after a quick explanation to everyone, they quickly headed out of the city of Roan. Arriving outside the gates, Kazuo heard a notification in his mind. Bloodline Mission 1/3. It was at this moment that he similarly felt a rush of chakra as memories returned back to him. "I see, so that's what happened, huh? Well, that's a third of the mission completed. Now I'll need to see if Obito's chakra would work for the next part." Kazuo thought to himself as he continued to follow the group as their body flickered through the forest. Their destination was Konoha once more. "I honestly thought it would be harder," Kazuo thought to himself. Chapter 116. The days passed, and this time there was no real rush towards their destination in comparison to when they had been going towards their mission location. Sitting around a crackling fire in the middle of the woods and eating a cooked boar that Obito had caught, the group continued to make jokes and conversation. Kazuo remained distant and only interjected in the conversation when asked. Looking up, he could see the shining stars through the gaps in the tree foliage. Still so far away, he thought to himself before releasing an inward sigh. He still had so many challenges ahead of him that he had thought out that at points it seemed daunting. Thoughts of giving up had come into his mind multiple times, however they had been squashed instantly. Yet they were persistent in their endeavor of taking hold of his mind. Naruto starts in 12 years from now. I have 12 years to grow and progress so that I can beat the likes of Nagato, Madara, and even Kagaya, though hopefully I'll manage to stop that before it even happens. Kazuo thought as he took a bite out of the meat kebab he had made. Those were his last thoughts about the subject as he once more regained control over himself. The night passed quickly, and after another day and night, the four of them finally returned to the village. Giving a wave to his team, Kazuo's body flickered toward the Hyuga district. His mind was calm and solemn as he readied himself. The Hyuga were a trouble but at the same time an opportunity for Kazuo. They were the second strongest clan in the village, however at the same time, they were extremely strict as well as corrupt. The main branch elders would even torture those of the same blood simply so that they could maintain their power. Is it even power though? Kazuo thought as he arrived at the Hyuga district gates and started walking normally instead of using chakra. Idiots who overestimate their own power whilst undermining that of others. Kazuo thought as he continued on his way. Finally, after a few minutes, he arrived at his new house. Overall it looked nice, he thought as he looked at the traditional Japanese house. Though I would have preferred a more Western-style house, but this is fine. Kazuo thought as he opened the front door and headed inside. He had plans for tomorrow and so he needed to get a good rest today. I'll be sparring with Obito tomorrow. I'll take that chance to try and see if my darkness Jinjutsu works on him. If it does, then I can use that to grab a vial of his blood. Hopefully, it does work as the space vial for the bloodline mission. As for perception, I'm quite sure that a vial of Hyuga blood will work. Kazuo thought as he continued through the hallway and into the living room. Sitting down on the sofa bed, he released a calm sigh. She's not home often, most likely on missions. Kazuo thought as his mind wandered to his now wife. Sorry Hyuga. She's going to be a hard hurdle if I want her to turn to my side. Of course, I could use other means. Kazuo thought as his mind explored the idea of some kind of jutsu that could offer complete mind control. The only thing I can image being able to do something like that is the Manjikyu Sharingan, more precisely Uchiha Shirsui's Kodo Ematsukami. Getting up on the sofa after a few minutes, Kazuo quickly headed to the bathroom, cleaning himself before heading to bed and sleeping almost instantly. Waking up tomorrow at 5 am as usual, he quickly readied his mind and body before getting dressed and heading towards Team 7's training ground. Next month, the new batch of ninjas will graduate from the academy. That means this training ground won't be ours anymore and officially Team 7 will be disbanded. Kazuo thought as he arrived at the training ground entrance. So much to think about. Sasuke was in the village, which can only mean that something huge changed in the future. What I can think most about is the survival of the Uchiha clan. It does make sense with Obito being here, which would lead to Minato being alive as well. Kazuo thought before his mind turned to Naruto's outburst. Will I be a rogue ninja? Kazuo wondered, though he found the idea highly unlikely. After all the work I've done to get into this village's good graces, the chance of me leaving all of that behind is quite low. Kazuo thought as he arrived at the center of the training grounds. In front he could see Kakashi and Obito already sparring with each other. Minato wasn't together with them most of the time these days. He was being prepared by Hiruzen for the Hokage role. Yo! Kazuo said in a jolly voice as he raised his hand. Kakashi raised a hand in a wave as he replied with a similar tone. Yo! This guy is changing too much, every day at that. Kazuo thought, even feeling slightly weirded out by the guy. You're a bit late today, something happened? Obito questioned as he raised an eyebrow. Kazuo simply gave a shrug. I saw a black cat, so I had to walk the long way over. For a moment the clearing stood in silence before a dark expression engulfed Obito's face. What is going on with this world? It's all gone backwards. He mumbled as he almost felt like the ground underneath him was about to disappear. Anyways, wanna spar? Kazuo questioned as he walked to the duo. Sure, Obito replied before jumping a few dozen meters away. Kakashi merely gave a light nod before getting out of the way to clear space for the two. After getting a fair distance away, he announced, Start! With that, both ninjas immediately sprung into action. Though one of them was still a Chunin and the other a newly minted Jonin, their speed was anything but. It was as if two Kage-level ninja were about to battle it out, as they both disappeared in an instant and reappeared in front of each other, clashing their hands with taijutsu. Kazuo continued to keep a slight distance away from Obito, however, and only clashed with him when needed. Though his physical attributes had grown beyond compare, they were still lower than the cheat of a character that was Obito, who had even gained a portion of Hashirama's physical capabilities. You've gotten better, Obito, Kazuo said as he distanced himself after a minute or so. So have you, Obito replied as he readied himself once more. Kazuo gave a light nod before saying with a slight smile, "How about we take this to the next level?" With those words, Kazuo instantly released hundreds of paper sheets into the air. Chapter 117, hundreds upon hundreds of white paper slips launched into the surroundings. They instantly attached themselves to the surroundings, be it the ground, the tree, or even the air itself, as they started changing color, and in an instant, it was like the papers had been a mere illusion as they camouflaged themselves. Obito instantly got on edge as his 3 Tomo Sharingan started spinning quicker and quicker before the Tomo started merging together, forming a new Sharingan, a Manjikyu Tomo pattern. Kazuo merely furrowed his brows for a moment as his own body started disappearing. "I can't see him or the papers even with my Manjikyu?" Obito asked, his mouth dropping slightly in shock at what was happening before his very own eyes. Kazuo, or rather his paper clone who had just turned invisible, showed a grin at Obito's muttered words. "Finally, a level of mastery that allows me to fool even the Manjikyu. I've finally reached a similar mastery in this jutsu to what Konin had been capable of." Kazuo thought as the paper clone raised its hand, and in an instant, invisible papers gathered all around Obito. A new paper clone appeared on the field at this moment, looking at Obito. "You're surrounded, do you want to take this further?" he asked. Obito merely released a grunt as he ran towards the clone at immense speeds, weaving hand signs. The sound of lightning rang out as his hand was covered in white. Kakashi taught him the Chidori? Kazuo thought, impressed, as Obito speared his clone through the stomach, causing it to disperse in paper slips. "A clone? Since when?" Obito muttered as his eyes moved wildly around. However, he couldn't find a single sign of Kazuo. It was at this point that he felt something prick his skin. "It's over." That could have been a killing blow. "Kazuo, the real one," said as he came in from outside the training grounds. "You weren't here? How did you know?" "If you had used a shadow clone to keep watch over the battlefield, then I should have been able to see it even if it was covered in paper," Obito questioned as he raised his hands in surrender. "I added the shadow clone memory transfer trait into the paper clone. It took a while, but I was able to reverse engineer it and then add it to my own jutsu," Kazuo answered. "Damn geniuses," Obito muttered under his breath in reply as he dropped to the ground. The spar had caused him to be almost completely covered in sweat, whilst Kazuo stood there as if he had simply been drinking tea. "Of course, that's not the truth. I had to rewind 4 times throughout the spar to achieve this result." Kazuo thought to himself almost mockingly at the fact that even after everything it had needed 4 deaths to arrive at the desired outcome. "It's not too bad, however. The fact is that I lost in the first 2 turns, on the third it was a close match, and on the fourth, it was an alright win but not an absolute one. It was only now on the 5th turn that I completely dominated him." This at least helped in realizing a weakness of Kamui. If he cannot see the enemy or detect them, Obito can't do anything. However, that doesn't make Obito easy. In fact, if he had wanted to and this was a real battle, Obito wouldn't have been in danger even once. That damned ability basically makes him impossible to kill unless taken by surprise. Kazuo thought in annoyance that he kept hidden under an impeccable mask of carefreeness. "Now, do you want to go for a turn, Kakashi?" Kazuo asked as he turned to the white spiky-haired ninja who was turning more and more into a second Jiraiya, to the complete and utter puzzlement of Team 7 and Kushina and anyone else who knew the young man really. Kakashi merely gave a subtle nod as he walked to the center of the clearing. Kazuo nodded as he got into his own stance. It was at this moment that a voice was heard from the front of the training ground. "Do you 3 not do anything besides train these days?" asked the loud voice of the Uzumaki redhead. "God, it's this insufferable woman again," Kazuo thought to himself as he turned and gave Kushina and Rin, who appeared to be walking next to her, a welcoming kind smile. "Kushina-san, Rin. What are you doing here?" Kazuo asked with a kind tone. "Well, you 3 probably haven't eaten, and I took the rest of today off as there wasn't much work at the hospital, so we decided to make you all some lunch," Rin answered as she lifted a wooden basket she held on her right hand. "Just on time," Obito said loudly as he practically ran at the 2, his mouth appearing to already have started watering at the thought of a meal made by his precious Rin. "Is this really the guy I had to rewind time 4 times to beat cleanly?" Kazuo thought in annoyance as he and Kakashi followed behind him. The group sat down on the ground and started eating. From outside it looked like a regular picnic. It would have been if one of them wasn't a practical regressing sociopath, the second being an insane man completely obsessed with a woman, the third being a mentally broken teen with a growing perverse mind, and the last two being practical jails for monstrous beings. This is almost comedic. Kazuo thought inwardly whilst asking out loud. So when is the Hokage inauguration? It's tomorrow, don't tell me you forgot that, Kushina asked, showing a glare as she looked at Kazuo like she wanted to beat the living hell out of him. Kazuo merely raised his hands in surrender and gave a trembling smile. Sorry, I just have a lot on my plate these days and keep losing track of things. Outwardly the young ninja appeared nervous if not quite tired at how held up he had been these days whilst inwardly he felt nothing. If anyone had been able to sense his true emotions, they would have most likely been shocked. With his increased charisma, Kazuo was close to being able to even fake his own emotions to such a level that he could make himself feel happiness, guilt, fear, or any other emotion forcefully. Still, I'm not quite there. A small stat upgrade will allow me to do it, but it will take quite a lot of concentration, and a complete grade upgrade would allow me to do it pretty well if not perfectly. Kazuo thought to himself as he analyzed his own capabilities. Chapter 118, Kazuo's mind went back to the battle with Obito. During one of the turns he had managed to drink a bit of Obito's blood whilst using an illusion to hide the sight. Thankfully, even after having reversed the timeline, the progress on the mission hadn't been lost. That didn't mean it was exactly useful, however. Bloodline mission. Time, 1/1, perception, 0.5/1, space, 0.5/1. The Uchiha blood gave me a half point in perception and space. I can easily get the rest of my perception from the Hyuga, but what about the space? Maybe Minato or Kushina? Minato has a high affinity to space jutsu and Kushina is an Uzumaki. They are known for sealing, which does have quite a large link to space. Kazuo thought to himself as he maintained a friendly smile and continued his conversations outside of his mind at the same time as he was thinking. I'll just have to try both of them. First, I'll complete perception tonight. Getting blood from my wife should be easy enough. Her capabilities are merely at the Jonin level. As for Minato or Kushina's blood, I'll have to wait for a chance. The best time would be during the attack of the Nine Tails. However, I don't even know if that will happen in this timeline, but the mission said that I didn't completely destroy Madara's plans, so there is still a chance. I'll have to be patient. Kazuo thought as he steeled his mind to wait for the remaining months until October 10th, and if nothing happened, then he would have to make different plans. He wasn't in a rush. There were still plenty of different trainings that he had to complete and areas of inadequacy that he had to squash first. Taijutsu is fine, and so are ninjutsu and jinjutsu. However, my speed of movement, my stamina, and physical strength are still not great. I also have to start experimenting more with the new part of my time looping abilities, that future vision. If I can somehow learn to use it whenever I want, it would be a major help in battle. Much better than a Sharingan. Kazuo thought as ideas flooded his mind, his thoughts imagining a battle where he could read his opponent perfectly on the very first turn. This also lowers the chance of me making mistakes during battle. As much as looping back in time is effective, there will always be small changes to the timeline from the previous one, and I cannot act out the previous turns perfectly, at least not yet. Kazuo thought. Half an hour later, the group dispersed as they all went their separate paths. Kazuo headed towards the Hyuga branch district, and he used the body flicker jutsu to arrive in front of its gates in mere seconds. The body flicker allows for quick movement, however it still can't reach its full potency without a Sharingan. Should I transplant one? It would put a huge strain on my chakra system, however, and would also immediately turn me into a rogue shinobi. For the moment it's not worth it. A Manjikyu might be. I'll have to see how it goes. Kazuo thought as he walked through the gates after giving the guards a shallow nod of his head. The Hyuga members had started accepting him, though it was still clear that they didn't truly consider him as one of their own. That was not something he could change, however they had started to respect him as his fame in the village continued to grow. Walking towards his house on the outskirts of the district, Kazuo entered inside and heard the sounds of fists, or rather palms, hitting wood. Walking to the back of the small building and outside onto the small porch, he saw his arranged wife doing kata in front of a wooden dummy. He merely gave her a nod as he sat down on the tatami of the small terrace, watching her movements and studying the Hyuga taijutsu. This was something he had started to do recently. Whilst he couldn't fully replicate the Hyuga taijutsu at all, he could still learn from it and glean part of the reason as to why those movements were made and the reason behind them. This had started to help him in combining his different taijutsu styles together. The Minato style relies heavily on reactions, whilst the Hyuga style relies much more on perception of the space between oneself and their opponent and predicting the movements of the enemy and restricting them rather than reacting to a movement after the enemy launched it. In a sense, the Minato style is quite similar to the Uchiha taijutsu. Kazuo thought as he waved his hand after seeing her finish her training. "I was thinking of going out for dinner. Do you wish to join me?" Kazuo asked Saori as he rose from where he was sitting on the tatami floor. Saori gave him a look for a moment before giving a curt nod of her head. "All right, we can head to the Akimichi district. They opened a new restaurant." Minato and Kushina said it had some delicious food. Kazuo said, half-truth and half-lies. He had never talked to Minato and Kushina about this, however by saying this, it would increase the reputation of the place and make it easier for Saori to fully accept heading there, and at least be less of a bitch about it if Kazuo was honest. "Honestly, this is almost a waste of time. I thought they would be less stuck up their own ass." Kazuo thought as he remembered back to the last few weeks. Still, progress is being made, from being able to barely tolerate each other to this. "I just need to continue, and after saving her life a few times in missions, I should be able to reach the conclusion I want." Kazuo thought as he felt like grinning inwardly. "Ah, I really want to say all according to plan." Kazuo thought to himself before calming his emotions down. "I'll go get changed. I just finished training as well," Kazuo said as he turned and headed inside the house. Chapter 119. The sun was high in the sky, no clouds marred it, allowing it to shine brightly upon the hidden leaf village. At the center, right before the Hokage building, stood hundreds of men, women, and children dressed in formal clothes. Today was the day when a new leader would be appointed. A new Hokage, who would swear before them, gave an oath of a brighter and more peaceful future to his people in this harrowing world they lived in. In a world where children were forced to become cold killers at an early age. A world filled with orphans and a world where nothing besides real power held much value. Kazuo was standing close to the front row of this group of people, gazing up at the Hokage building with a complex expression. He had been given such a spot as he was one of the disciples of the new leader, Minato Namikaze, who was about to be inaugurated as the fourth Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves. It's here, one of the major events in the story. Minato is finally taking his place as the Hokage. This means in only a few months, Naruto will be born, the protagonist of this world. Kazuo thought his emotions weren't anything positive, they were in fact filled with disdain. Telling others that even a nobody can become someone, that it wasn't fate that decided one's life but rather their own hard work. Coming from the son of the Hokage and the reincarnation of the son of someone who could be called a god. Really, Kazuo thought in annoyance, his eyes unconsciously growing murderous for a second before he quickly reined his emotions, replacing them with a cheerful look that screamed of unbound happiness. "Kazuo, there you are," Rin said as she called out to him from Kazuo's left. Turning to look at her, Kazuo saw four familiar faces. It was Rin Noara, Obito Uchiha, Kakashi Hatake, and finally, it was someone surprising, it was Jiraiya of the Sannin. Kazuo quickly gave a bow at the man. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Kazuo said softly, his words filled with respect contrary to his utterly emotionless inner mind. The man simply laughed as he patted his shoulder. "Don't be so stiff, you're Minato's disciple," Jiraiya said as he and the rest stood around Kazuo and gazed up at the Hokage building as well. Saori, Kazuo's wife, was standing farther back in line together with the Hyuga clan, whilst Kushina, Minato's wife, was likely up at the Hokage building together with her husband. It was at this moment that Hiruzen, the third Hokage, made his appearance before the people, standing on the roof of the Hokage tower as he looked down. "People of the Leaf, today is a joyous day for all of us. The time has come for the old generation to give way to the new. Today is the day when a new leader will stand before us. A man we all know, who has given everything for the peace that we all enjoy, a man who has shined more brightly than any other. Hiruzen said, his voice loud enough to be heard by everyone, clearly augmented by some kind of jutsu. Without further wait, I present before you the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Hiruzen said as he turned to face behind him, a new figure appearing before the people as they walked to the front of the roof. Wearing a long white cape that was painted as if fire was engulfing its edges. There stood Minato Namikaze. Previously the yellow flash of the leaf and now the fourth Hokage. Minato lowered his lead slightly to Hiruzen, who took off the Hokage cap from his head and placed it on Minato's. The man, now with the Hokage cap on his head, turned towards his people who started cheering happily, joyous expressions on their faces. Their cheering voices were heard all over the village. Kazuo gave the same reaction, his emotions appearing to mirror those of the people surrounding him perfectly. Jiraiya, who was next to him, was doing the same, however his eyes were stealthily looking at Kazuo. Impressive. The man thought silently. I am honored for this position that has been bestowed upon me. Minato started as he looked down at his people. I swear that as the Hokage, I will protect everyone in this village and that I will give it my all, for a brighter future. So that the fire of the leaf never extinguishes and so that the new generations can flourish even more than we have. Minato continued, his voice steady and confident as it boomed, sending shivers of joy through his people. I hereby swear an oath that I will protect everyone as family. For we, people of the leaf, are that to each other. We are all part of this tree that has flourished and preserved through the years. He said before continuing for a few more minutes, the villagers and shinobi below listening. It took around half an hour before the event was over, yet the people didn't disperse and instead started chatting among each other happily, laughing in joy as they continued to celebrate. Kazuo turned to the group as he said with a kind smile on his face. How about we all go grab some food? That sounds great, I'm starving, Obito answered as the whole group quickly agreed. Let me go get Saori. Just a moment. Kazuo thought as he turned to walk towards the Hyuga, who had already started heading back towards their clan grounds. This is a good opportunity to get Saori closer to my faction as well as to talk with Jiraiya. That bastard thought I didn't see his gaze when we were cheering, didn't he? Kazuo thought as he felt like releasing a laugh but held it in. Chapter 120. Days continued to pass, the sun rising and falling over and over as the days swiftly turned into weeks and then into months. It was now October 1st of the 65th year since the creation of Konoha. 9 days before the Nine-Tails attack and the day Naruto had been born in the original timeline. Far away from the village hidden in the leaves, a group of 4 shinobi were running through a desolate plain at high speeds. At the head of the group stood Kazuo Hyuga, behind him were 3 random Chunin who had been assigned to be under his command for his current mission. The target should be close, around 5 minutes from here at our current pace, and we should arrive at the destination. Kazuo thought as he raised his hand to stop the group. The 3 Chunin behind him quickly stopped their running. I'll be heading forward myself, stay here and be ready, Kazuo commanded, earning 3 quick nods before he vanished from his position in an instant. His speed had continued to increase as his body grew and adapted to higher and higher loads of weight. If the distance had been 5 minutes away from their previous pace, Kazuo now arrived in merely 60 seconds. Having traveled 10 miles. Averaging at around 600 miles per hour. And this wasn't even his fastest speed. Arriving at the destination, Kazuo quickly hid himself as he looked below him from the top of a tree. Down below him stood a small camp that clearly was formed quickly and was merely a makeshift one, meant to be removed and any traces of it extinguished as soon as the shinobi bellow had enough rest. Looking around the camp, Kazuo quickly located 10 shinobi as well as 1 civilian. Differentiating between his target and the shinobi was easy enough, one could tell simply by the way the untrained man carried himself in comparison to the trained killers. 10 rogue shinobi, likely a part of an organized group that takes missions or bounties. Kazuo thought as he observed for a moment before raising his right hand towards the target. In an instant, his hand deformed as his skin seemed to peel off and turn into paper sheets before these paper slips combined and formed a long needle that changed color to become invisible. It didn't take more than a split second between the launch of the needle and its impact on the forehead of the target. The needle had been thin, however the speed it had been launched had caused the man to be thrown several meters back and for half his head to explode in a shower of brain matter, flesh, and blood. "Damned, it's an ambush," one of the shinobi said as the remaining 9 quickly got on their guards looking around them for the enemy. However, Kazuo had already long left the area. 1 minute later, the shinobi were still looking around cautiously whilst Kazuo had already returned to the clearing where the Chunin were waiting. "Let's get going, the mission is complete," Kazuo announced as he didn't wait a second and continued to body flicker, his pace much slower so that the ninja would be capable of following him. "So this is Kazuo, the flashing demon," one of the Chunin thought in wonder as he gazed at Kazuo's back as he body flickered behind him. During the last few months, with Minato having become Hokage, Kazuo had managed to increase his reputation not just with the civilians of the Leaf but with the rest of the shinobi forces to a major degree. Having the Hokage as your master clearly had benefits. If Kazuo had to put a name to it, then he would say it was like having a diamond spoon in his mouth. As Kazuo ran ahead, his mind wasn't focused on the mission he had just completed at all. Even though it had been an A-rank mission, it honestly wasn't anywhere near exciting enough, at least not compared to the possible event coming in less than 2 weeks. Would Madara have found a replacement for Obito? Or would it be someone like Nagato attacking? Or it is also possible that nothing happens. Kazuo thought before he stopped himself. Let's not jinx myself, the Kamui was already broken enough. Kazuo thought inwardly before releasing an inward sigh. I totally have already jinxed myself, and considering my luck. Kazuo thought in annoyance as he continued his body flickering towards the village hidden in the leaves. During these months, Kazuo had managed to complete quite a few tasks, and increase his strength. Though it wasn't as massive of an increase as during the war, it was still worth mentioning. First, it was the bloodline mission. Bloodline mission. Time, 1/1, space, 0.5/1, perception, 1/1. Just as he had thought, the Hyuga blood had managed to fully complete the perception requirement. However, the space still remained incomplete. He had even decided to not wait and used a time loop to gather Minato's blood and Kushina's after much trial and error. It had taken him close to 100 loops to manage to harm the man enough. However, it had all led to a disappointment. Neither the Namikaze nor Uzumaki blood had worked. Am completely lost on what could fill that last requirement besides Otsutsuki blood. There could be some other clan that was mentioned in the Naruto movies or the light novels, however I don't remember much of either, so I'm basically blind on that part. Kazuo thought with an annoyed inward sigh as he opened his status panel to check his status. Status. Name, Kazuo Hyuga. Affiliation, Hidden Leaf Village. Age, 13. Race, human. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 7. Peace.